that day. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain, and indeed Europe. Today, it's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of May. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Nana Acquia. Right, so coming up, a landmark UK-EU Brexit reset deal is secured ahead of Sir Keir Starmer's seismic London summit. Closer ties with Brussels or the road to rejoin. We're live with the latest.
Sir Keir Starmer agrees a Brexit reset deal. The top line is 12 years of access for EU fishing trawlers. There's lots more. I have all the details in a moment.
Well, yes, that betrayal of British fishing. The Prime Minister has been accused of handling over more than a decade of UK waters to EU fleets. We're going to be live in Kirkeel in Northern Ireland.
Yes, Gary Lineker is set to resign from the BBC today after facing backlash over sharing a video branded anti-Semitic depicting Zionists as rats. We'll have the latest.
Yes, that's right. Gary Lineker expected to leave the BBC after his 26-year career. He will no longer present their World Cup coverage next year after his position became untenable thanks to a series of social media posts.
Elsewhere, the NHS faces criticism over a gender construction kit offered to trans patients. Is this supportive guidance or simply a step too far? Well, good afternoon, Britain. At 1 minute past 12, we can say that there has been an embargo lifted on some of these juicy details of the new agreement with the European Union. Let's go straight to Christopher Hope, our political editor, who has those details for us. Chris, what do we know?
That's right, Tom. Hi, Nana. Welcome to this big summit between the UK and European Union. You see behind me, it's all taking place. Sir Keir Starmer's in there with Ursula von der Leyen, the President. A press conference in half an hour. We have the details now of what's been agreed. I'll go through it very, very briefly. The UK has agreed that there'll be a 12-year agreement of our EU trawlers to fish in UK fishing waters. There is no return, as we know, to single market, the customs union or freedom of movement. As part of that deal on fishing, £360 million to modernise our UK fishing fleet. There'll be checks on animal and plant products removed completely at the border. That means you won't have food and other produce staying there, being delayed while it's being checked for red tape and having passports and other books stamped. This means, for example, that British burgers, sausages can be sold in the European Union for the first time since we left the European Union. There'll be a new food and drink agreement to cut red tape and delays at the EU border. No timing on that, but the problem there is the UK will be subject to EU rules again. We haven't been, of course, since we left the European Union. That means we will be rule takers, not rule makers. That'll be a key dividing line for many who'd want to defend Brexit from 2016. There's also a deal on emissions that with the UK won't be subject to any kind of emissions target taxes induced by the European Union. That, with the food and agriculture, will be worth apparently £9 billion the economy by 2040. No tariffs from the European Union on the UK steel industry, a boost for that with the problems that Scunthorpe's had. On a more of a kind of a consumer level, holidaymakers and travellers will not need to be stamped for their passports when entering the European Union, as is currently happening. You can go to those e-gates when EU members sign up to them, as will happen over the coming years. There's also agreement for pet passports. That's back. You can go on holiday, Tom and Nana, with your pet, your dog or your cat, and take it with you. No concerns there about not being able to take them. And also, the UK will be allowed to bid for a security and defence partnership worth £150 billion. A big boost there for UK jobs. Also, on a security level, the UK will have access to a European Union facial database. What has not been agreed, and quite important that viewers and listeners understand this, an agreement to allow freedom of movement for the under-30s backwards and forwards with the European Union. They are looking at a capped agreement similar to what we have with Australia and New Zealand, but as things stand, no deal. So that's the bones of the deal, but no question what's really counting here, Tom and Nana, and that's fish. It looks like fishermen have not got the deal they wanted when so many communities, coastal communities, voted to leave the European Union back in 2016. We know that vividly from our postbag at GB News, and that'll be a concern for many communities this morning.
Chris, it seems like there's been a lot of give and take here. I mean, the government will be crowing about the lack of e-gates and the pet passports and the access to that €150 billion defence fund for our defence manufacturers. All good stuff, although perhaps it might seem that those first two are a bit more peripheral, a bit more to do with how nice your summer holidays are. Whereas on the other hand, fishermen are going to be feeling that they were looking forward to getting back control over our waters. The transition period was meant to end next year, and now it will go on in effect for another 12 years. I mean, that is going to be a damning piece of news for those fishing communities who were so looking forward to having that access after this long transition period. Yeah. And on the other hand as well, farmers now going to be having to use EU rules to produce food, to grow crops, and the British government's going to pay the EU to adjudicate all of that.
That's right, those two issues, let's break them down there. No question that the fishing communities, many of whom now have a Labour MP after the last election, will be wondering what on earth is it for us? Why has this government sold us out? It turns out it's a long list now of growing groups who feel betrayed by this government. Pensioners, of course, we had that. We had farmers now with the farming tax. National insurance has hit employers, and now we have the fishermen. I mean, there's a big list here of voters with a grievance against this Labour government. Now, the government would say, yes, we are extending trawler access for another 12 years, but we are giving UK fishermen access to the European Union. This big market, they've had problems getting our shellfish and fish sold into it. That will change, and that is a positive, no question. But yeah, big concern, I think, for communities here who felt they're getting one thing for Brexit and, frankly, getting another thing. But as you say there, we are going to be rule takers, not rule makers, on food standards now. That could be a problem also when we try and do trade deals with other countries. Are we tied too closely to European Union standards? And that means we can't do a deal. We had an agreement just 10 days ago now with the US. That was an outline deal, but of course lots of detail to be hammered out there. How will Washington be looking at this deal now it's announced just moments ago? Will they think that a deal for on trading and selling those quotas of British beef and other meats, is that now a problem? Will that now go ahead or not? A lot to talk about, and don't forget, before I go into the press conference, we are writing here the first lines, the battle lines of the next general election. The Tories have said to us last week, Kevin Badenoch told us on GB News, she would not sign up to anything agreed here that weakens what they see as Brexit. Well, this deal, they will think, weakens Brexit. She said as much already on social media. That means in 4 years' time, this Brexit battle that Labour will say is over, isn't over. Reform will go after them, as will the Tories.
All right, Christopher Hope, thank you very much. That's GB News' political editor with all the details of that important summit this afternoon.
And of course, do stay watching with us. Christopher Hope is going to go into that building behind him and speak to the Prime Minister. We'll bring you all of that live.
Now, the BBC has just released this statement. Gary Lineker will leave his presenting role following the conclusion of Match of the Day for the 2024-25 season. He will not be part of the BBC's coverage of the 2026 World Cup or next season's FA Cup coverage.
Now, this marks a significant shift from what they previously said, but of course it follows that scandal, Gary Lineker sharing that video deemed to be, by many, anti-Semitic. Well, our reporter Adam Cherry is for us live to tell us more of the details here. Adam, confirmation.
That's right, yeah. We were expecting this announcement in the last couple of minutes. Gary Lineker has shared a post on social media confirming that he will be leaving after he presents Match of the Day for the final time this Sunday. He's been at the BBC for over 26 years, and in that statement he said, "Football has been at the heart of my life for as long as I can remember, both on the pitch and in the studio. I care deeply about the game and about the work I have done with the BBC over many years. As I've said, I would never consciously repost anything anti-Semitic. It goes against everything I I stand for. However, I recognise the error and upset I caused, and I reiterate how sorry I am. Stepping back now feels like the responsible course of action. Of course, this is the latest in a series of controversial posts from Gary Lineker on social media. This one concerning a post about, to quote the post itself, Zionism, and there was an emoji of a rat within that post. Gary Lineker says he didn't notice that, and if he had, he never would have shared it. But nonetheless, he will step back permanently after this Sunday and therefore will not present the World Cup coverage for the BBC as planned next year.
It's a pretty profound moment there, Adam. Of course, Gary Lineker, it's not the first time he's found himself in hot water, but they were expecting this departure to take place, but perhaps on more amicable terms, no longer presenting Match of the Day, but doing those big-ticket events for the BBC. Now it seems that relationship has been completely severed, perhaps not on those good terms that Gary Lineker wanted to go out on.
Well, absolutely, Tom. In fact, I'll just read a statement from the Director General, the BBC Director General, Tim Davie. He says, Gary has acknowledged the mistake he made. Accordingly, we have all agreed he will step back from further presenting after this season. Gary has been a defining voice in football coverage for the BBC for over 2 decades. Goes on to say we want to thank him for the contributions he made. But nonetheless, in the Sun reporting this morning, which first broke this news, it was said that his position had become untenable. And obviously this was the latest, as you said, in a series of posts over several years, particularly in the last 18 months following the 7th of October. And at this point, it just become too much, and therefore he will step back even sooner than expected, as you say, Tom.
Well, it's absolutely, well, I think it's about time, really, frankly. They even changed the guidelines to encompass him, and then he broke those as well. So I suspect that he was sacked because he's sort of saying it's being pitched as though he's leaving and he's chosen to leave and he's realised it's wrong. But I suspect that if he'd been able to stay, he would have done. That is the thing. So do we know, a lot of people apparently saying that Gary has lots of other offers already. Do we know anything about what Gary may well be doing after the BBC?
Well, I suspect he'll be continuing to live comfortably now, and I don't have the specific details yet. I want to just say, actually, he's got his Goal Hanger Productions podcast company, which has been very, very successful. You know, it covers politics, news, obviously sport. So you would expect that he will focus more on that. But for now, of course, we're just basing our reporting on the latest news coming from the BBC themselves, and indeed Gary Lineker on his social media page.
This has been a very trying time for the BBC, of course, Adam. I mean, we've seen lots of different scandals rock that organisation, and almost it seems that whatever they do, they end up irritating sort of one half of one debate. I mean, there are people who say that the BBC itself is a deeply anti-Semitic organisation, and there are others who say that they employ lots of, or that their coverage is not critical enough of Israel as well. You do see a lot of the left complain to the BBC on that. It's almost like they're walking a complete tightrope on these issues, and they seem to be stepping their foot in it on either side of the line.
Well, it's the mistakes, isn't it? I mean, they said that rocket was from Israel, and it turned out to be from Hamas.
Yes.
And also that documentary that they did recently was also an issue. Listen, Adam Cherry, thank you very much. Keep us posted and informed on Gary Lineker. Can't say I'm disappointed, I'll be totally honest with you. Gary has not been a friend to me after he retweeted and called me vile.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
on social media.
Well, cheers, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Gary. I don't mean to be cruel, but I shouldn't be.
Well, we're going to move on now because
Why not?
the Prime Minister is, of course, being accused now of capitulating to the European Union. Sir Keir Starmer's government has signed off a new trade deal with the EU, allowing French trawlers to have access to British waters for 12 years.
Keir Starmer's caved in again, as all previous UK governments have done to Europe.
Well, the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, rejects these comments, saying that this new deal will open up new markets for fishermen.
It's not just about what you gain in terms of fishing in the UK, it's who you sell that product to. And a lot of the stuff, particularly shellfish, particularly salmon, we have major markets for in the European Union. So you've got to think about not just what you're catching, but who you're going to sell it to, how easy is it to do that. And at present, it is not easy. You talk to anyone, whether they manufacture chocolate or whether they sell shellfish into France, it's very slow, it's very difficult, it's costly. So there's big gains for that sector by removing those checks.
So has Sir Keir Starmer caved in? Let's speak to fisherman Andrew Carter. Andrew, listening to this, it was supposed to be in 2026 that we would then have the freedom of our own waters, and now this has literally been extended for a further 12 years. What are your thoughts on this, what's been negotiated?
Well, it's just a disgrace. But firstly, I think we should all say well done to the EU negotiators. They've done really, really well. Since Brexit, we've been spanked like naughty children. The EU have done everything in their power to make it hard for us to trade. Absolutely everything. And now that they've got what they want, they've always wanted the fishing. And at the end of the day, in Brexit, they wanted the fishing. We had an exit deal. It came to the end of that. And Mr. Starmer, a staunch Remainer, well done. You've given it away for nothing. You never give 12 months extra so we could talk about it. What does the fishing minister and the fisheries minister, what does he think? He needs to be on explaining himself. Has he told Mr. Starmer what's going on? As he turns around and says, look, it'll finish the fishing industry, the UK fishing industry. Has he told him and Mr. Starmer's just ignored him, or has Mr. Starmer just went with his buddies with the EU and negotiated something that's going to absolutely decimate with an island nation that cannot feed itself? We cannot
Andrew,
feed ourselves.
Of course, what the government argues is that this annual negotiation that was going to take place from next year would be a difficulty for business, that you wouldn't know exactly what the quota was until those negotiations were finished, that they'd have to happen every single year. What do you say to the government's case there, that it's better to have certainty for 12 years than these annual negotiations, even if those annual negotiations would give you greater access to fish?
Well, the annual negotiations for the EU is going to be an absolute nightmare because they're our waters and we can fish them. So I think there's something like 1/8 of EU waters that UK boats fish, and they compared to what they fish ours. I mean, realistically, UK waters don't depend on their fishing. I mean, we don't depend on their fishing grounds. They've depleted most of their grounds. They depend on ours. But now what Mr. Starmer's done is just give them 12 years worth. I mean, I'm not being funny. Negotiating like that, I wouldn't like him to. Now I know what I mean. It's just crazy. I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words. And then he comes and turns around and says, oh, here's a little carrot, 360 million growth fund. There's going to be nothing to grow. There's going to be nothing to grow, Mr. Starmer. I want the fisheries minister. I want to hear what he says. And if he hasn't advised Mr. Starmer on this, and Mr. Starmer hasn't asked him, there should be questions. What's the point of having a fisheries minister that isn't, let him explain himself. And if he has, then let Mr. Starmer explain why he's given it away. Crazy, well, absolutely crazy.
Well, Andrew Carter, hopefully Keir Starmer will do just that in around 13 minutes' time. We're expecting that press conference, and our man in the room, Chris Hope, will definitely be asking him questions, hopefully the questions that you have raised. Andrew Carter, fisherman, thanks so much for joining us and talking through that issue.
Let's hope that Keir Starmer does take the question, but I don't think any of the questions will be easy, so he's not going to be able to avoid them all. But joining us now is Dr. Mike Galsworthy. He is the chair of European Movement UK. Now, this must be music to your ears, surely, this whole EU-UK summit. How are you feeling about the fish? You've heard what...
I don't like the bit about the fish, because I think our fishermen constantly get screwed over by all political parties. They got screwed over going into the EEC in the first place. They got screwed over really hard in Brexit. If you remember the fishing minister then saying she didn't even read the details because she was doing the nativity thing. And now it looks like they're getting shafted again. The upside for this is that if you remember when Brexit came and then the access to actually sell into the European markets immediately got cut off because of the health checks, because of all the paperwork, I want confirmation that, when they say removing health checks and all that, and they say for food, it's like, this includes fish and the shellfish, right? It is for the lobsters and the oysters And then is part of this fund going to be used to help our fishermen actually get back into that market? Because there'll be other European companies supplying the restaurants and stuff now. So they've got to have an opportunity to actually be helped back in.
But for the last 4 years, we've had the worst of both worlds. We left the single market at the start of 2021, at which point that market access, of course, reduced. But also there was a transition period with regard to the fishermen that they would not get full access to the waters until 2026. And now, weirdly, some might say conspiratorially, just at the moment the fishermen were about to get the full access of British waters, that is now being cut off for 12 years, and instead we're going to go backwards to the system similar to the common fisheries policy that fishermen hated. We never got to see what the system would have been like had our fishermen had access to our waters, even if the trade with the EU would be slightly more frictionful.
I come back to fishermen keeping getting screwed over. They don't get a good say in these negotiations. Everyone says, oh, it's a small market. They're always the afterthought that get knocked down. And one of the things that's very frustrating for them is they see that their counterparts in Norway, in Iceland, in France, you know, their governments fight for their fishermen. You know, whether it be inside the EU or outside the EU, other countries' governments fight harder for their fishermen, which is probably partly why you're seeing what you're seeing.
Although, of course, for a country like Iceland, the fishing sector is, of course, a much larger proportion of their economy. One area that we don't have any detail at all is financial services, of course, a much larger area of our economy. There's so many different areas in this deal.
I don't think... Does that come into it at all?
I don't think it does.
One of the criticisms from the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, has been that it has been ignored in this negotiation. But I wanted to come to this issue of movement of young people. Because this is a particular concern for some Brexit voters, suggesting that, yes, of course, there's the free movement deal for young people in the Australian, New Zealand deals.
No, they're not free movement deals. They're youth mobility.
Youth mobility for,
so it's not
for 3
a right,
years.
it's a visa,
it's a right to have a visa. So you can come with no questions asked for 3 years.
So what are your thoughts on it?
So I think it's a really good thing.
You think?
Definitely, because, like, no one born this millennium voted for Brexit, right? And why should they be limited on opportunities when we have these kind of mobility visa schemes with 13 other different countries? It's not rolling back Brexit at all in order to just have limited time visa opportunities. And for our youth, it opens up tons of opportunities. The biggest example I'll give you is in the outbound holiday business, right? Which rakes in billions for this government, to the Exchequer about 2.4 billion, and 75% of our outbound travel is to the EU. Now, those companies that do package holidays, they buy up chalates, long-term leases, buy up villas, and then they like to second their staff from the UK over there. You know, the ones that greet you at the airport, the ones that drive the buses.
If you want to do a clean season, it might be better.
It's very one-sided.
And summer season as well.
No, but it's very one-sided, isn't it? Because loads of people from the EU will come to the UK, but proportionately, a lot less people from this country go to travel around the EU. And the bottom line is, where are all these people going to stay? We don't even have the accommodation for our own people.
Yeah, first of all, you don't know that it's going to be asymmetric. You kind of have to test it out.
But it has been so far. It has been so far.
Oh, what do you mean under free movement? You can never track it. Under Erasmus, you could, but that's because we didn't invest in Erasmus. So we'll see with this. But what I've been arguing, and I've written about this, is you need to make the outflow and the inflow balance.
Hang on, we'll see. Then you don't need Erasmus, because we have 4 of the top 10 universities in the world, and the EU has none of them. Surely that's the reason Erasmus has it.
We could talk to you for a long time, listen, because we've got such a big press conference coming very shortly. Mike, thank you very much. This is Good Afternoon Britain. Coming up, we'll be live at the press conference in central London as Sir Keir Starmer reveals a new deal with the EU.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
And
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Oh, can you tell me, please, about your time during the war? 50 bombing raids over Germany. Do you remember the first time you faced enemy fire?
Yes, very clearly. No one can tell you what it is like to be shot at. You have to experience it. And on my very first occasion, which was a raid on Hanover, we came under anti-aircraft fire. I have to tell you right from the outset that German anti-aircraft fire was very accurate, it was very lethal, and of course it was linked to radar, so they always knew where you were and where they expected you to be when the shells arrived. Well, we were naive, we were inexperienced, and as I say, nobody could tell you what it's going to be like. You have to experience it.
You must be very proud of what you did during the war and ultimately helping to save Britain from the Nazis.
Now, if you're looking for a hero, and I'm certainly not a hero, you must look at the boys that flew the heavy bombers, the Halifaxes and the Lancasters, because they flew much, much more slowly. Loaded, I think, somewhere under 200 miles an hour.
GB News, the People's Channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we're in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 12, and we're still waiting for that press conference from the Prime Minister just in the next few minutes. But of course, the PM is facing accusations of caving to Brussels as Sir Keir Starmer's new trade deal with the EU reportedly gives French trawlers access to British waters for the next 12 years.
Yes, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds rejects these comments, saying it'll open up new markets for them.
It's not just about what you gain in terms of fishing in the UK, it's who you sell that product to. And a lot of the stuff, particularly shellfish, particularly salmon, we have major markets for in the European Union. So you've got to think about not just what you're catching, but who you're going to sell it to, how easy is it to do that. And at present, it is not easy. You talk to anyone, whether they manufacture chocolate or whether they sell shellfish into France, it's very slow, it's very difficult, it's costly. So there's big gains for that sector by removing those checks.
Well, let's cross over to Northern Ireland now, where our reporter Doogie Beattie has the very latest for us. Doogie.
Yes, welcome to Kilkeel. There's real concern here about what this deal actually means, because if you remember just a couple of weeks ago, Britain did the Indian trade deal, which has thousands of tonnes of prawns, so forth, inside that deal at a much cheaper price. And there's also the concern here, what does this mean for the framework document? Hundreds of thousands of pounds were spent on veterinary controls, etc., coming into Northern Ireland's ports, and of course that is gone. But the real focus today, well, is it gone? The real focus today is with fishermen here, and I'm actually joined by Trevor Annett, who's a skipper.
Oh, we're losing a bit
what is your main worries?
Our main worries here is access, the limited access we have to local waters, because where we're at here, 6 miles down the shore is EU waters, and we can't get into those waters. Now, for the smaller boats, that waters provides work all through the winter. But for since Brexit came, we've been pushed out of those waters, and we're hearing today that EU vessels have unlimited access to UK waters, but what we're wanting to know now is, do we get unlimited access in return?
And how hard has it been for you as a businessman, never mind a skipper of a boat, with national insurance, costs of diesel, etc.?
It's getting to the point now. We're working month to month. We don't have a plan. We just every year goes by. You just say that's another year done. We haven't got a 5-year plan. You can't make major investments because you just don't know what the next year is going to bring as far as regulations and restrictions.
Very quickly, do you think Labour's sold you out in this?
I would be worried that they have.
Thank you.
Well, Doogie Beattie there, our reporter. Apologies for the connection there, dropping out just on one or two occasions. Still with us in the studio is Mike Galsworthy from the European Movement UK. Mike, there are huge numbers of different areas of this deal, but one that we haven't touched on so much is the food regulations that we'll be accepting from the EU. Dynamic alignment is almost the word of the day. This sort of means that whatever the EU decide, we're going to have to take a form of that law and put it in our own legislation. We're becoming rule takers.
Yeah, but given that the EU is 27 countries, we're not exactly going to be rule makers on them. You know, it's a membership club and everyone sort of...
But we're not members.
No, we're not, and we should be.
That's the point.
We should be.
But
when we were members, we had more of a say in it. But the way I see it is, that is annoying. Nevertheless, are the rules good? Because generally speaking, you want to follow rules that are good. And generally speaking, when you've got over 24 democratic countries that have similar kind of food standards to us,
you're a scientific guy,
and they come up with a set of rules, they tend to be
Mike,
good and solid.
You're a scientific guy.
Yes.
You know the EU has incredibly restrictive rules on GM crops.
Yes.
This is really damaging in terms of the use of pesticides. The EU uses pesticides because they can't use disease-resistant crops. The UK passed a piece of legislation a few years ago, a post-Brexit piece of legislation that liberalised what kind of crops farmers can use. We have great GM technology in this country. I mean, the biotech sector is huge. If we sign up to EU rules, we could limit the number of crops that farmers can plant. We'll follow the EU sort of superstitious anti-science rules on genetically modified crops.
It's not anti-science, and in fact, a lot of this is because there's a parliament in Europe and that listens to a lot of public concerns. In the States,
superstitious
there was
concerns.
Well, you can say that, but in the democracies, you've got to let people decide. In the States, for example, there was one time where there was 90% of people that wanted GMO labels on food that were GMO food. And the US government wouldn't have it because the lobby is being so strong. With GM foods, actually, the main places where they're most use is where the conditions are really harsh, in Africa or in some places in Asia, and crops are designed to grow there. There are some other, that's the main place where they provide extra yield that's going to be really significant.
Why can't our farmers have access to that extra yield?
Well, because these are crops that are meant for hardier conditions. I mean, I don't want us to go the way of America, where it's totally unregulated, and I think that we should be... Anyway, with regard to EU rules, they come from scientific advice, they come from the farmers, it's 24 countries again. I think for the most part they're pretty good. And I haven't heard a lot of scientists in the UK say we absolutely really need to have GM crops.
OK, but then if we must go along with their alignment for food and so on and so forth, what power do we have to veto? Because this is the thing, when you're in the EU, each of the member states have power of veto. I doubt we'll have any power at all, so we will simply be passengers going along with all the structures with no power at all to change anything whatsoever. How is that good?
It's not. We should be a member. But
we're
given that we're not a member...
So this isn't good.
You always would have... If there was something that we thought, like, this is really bad, like, they've got it totally wrong, there would always be the opportunity to say, look, guys, we think this is totally wrong, da-da-da-da-da. Can we have a meeting about this? Can we have a consideration, right? Because it's people, you're dealing with other people. And I can't foresee any circumstance that we would have a problem with something and the Dutch wouldn't, and the Swedes and the Danes and every other country.
But that's not good enough.
All of them would be like, no.
Yeah, but that's not good enough.
No, there will always be someone else who thinks that's a fair point.
There might not be. And it's very political, isn't it?
This is so fundamental that we then just rupture our contract.
No, why would they care? Listen, it means they can roll over or over us on anything, and they can club together against us on anything. We have actually absolutely no power whatsoever.
Under qualified majority voting in the Commission, we were in the losing minority more than any other country. When we were members of the European Union,
but what percentage,
because of the way that the votes
percentage
were,
of time was it? Right, so this goes back to all the Brexit stuff, where people are saying we're such victims inside the EU.
Well, we
may have the third largest. No, we didn't though. Like, and
we were in the losing minority more than any country.
Okay, you can.
Because they share the same currency, and we didn't.
As you said before, I'm a scientist, so I know how you can cut stats different ways. For the most part, the EU was doing exactly what we wanted, and we were leading on many, many fronts. And sometimes when you're in a club of over 24 things, sometimes people win on initiatives and sometimes people lose on initiatives. We were fully part of that team. We did really well from that team. And then we've just gone and sulked in a corner since. So if all these laws were going against us, here's the question, right? Which of these laws have we actually changed since to massive benefit, now that it's been 10 years since we initiated the Brexit debate? Because I remember Michael Gove was asked this, you know, what laws are we actually going to change? And he produced a piece of paper from his pocket, and the top one was the Clinical Trials Directive.
Huge.
Because that, absolutely huge. And at the time he pulled it out of his pocket, it had already been fixed. It'd already been revised. And who led the revision? It was Glenys Wilmot, who was a British MEP, and all of the different transparency organisations in clinical trials said, this is great, this is a real step up. So a lot of the people, I get the principle of you always... Look, I would like... Wimbledon to be able to run Wimbledon and Merton to be able to run Merton, right? But sometimes you have to say, you have sovereignty at this level, you have shared agreements at this level, and then you have international contracts as well, and you keep with them so long as they work with you, and you can always renegotiate.
How can you get out? Can we get out? Can we get out of this deal?
We were members of the EU, and then we decided to leave, and we left.
Well, that wasn't easy.
There's a door in, there's a door out.
I'd like to know.
Recently, there was a big argument in Canada about whether or not Canada should join the United States. You could argue that Canada would be richer if it pooled its sovereignty with the big union to itself.
Polls show they'd like to join the EU.
But the reason Canada didn't want to join the United States wasn't an issue of economic rationalism. It was an issue of rational self-determination.
Yes.
Not of economic interest, but of the idea that Canada is an independent nation.
Yes.
Is that not entirely analogous?
Well, no, because if they were to join the States, they would be annexed by a country. They'd be absorbed by a country. As Donald Trump said, they're all going to, 40 million of them, be pushed into one state.
Isn't that exactly where the EU is headed?
What?
Isn't that the same thing?
Isn't that exactly where the EU is headed?
No, because the EU doesn't set policy on kind of like how you run your health service. It doesn't set your budgets or anything like that.
To be fair, the United States of America doesn't
a club
set...
of nations.
Individual states have their own state healthcare policies.
They have a degree of independence.
If a state wanted to nationalise healthcare, they could.
But so much less.
Right, but here's the thing. What has happened over the course of the last 40 years in first the EEC and then the EU? You had the Maastricht Treaty and the Treaty of Nice and the Treaty of Lisbon. You had every treaty, time and time again, centralising more power, taking more power from national governments and taking it to a sort of federal-level government that now controls so many different elements of national life, and it's on a one-way ratchet. Has there ever been a power that the European Union has returned to member states? It only takes powers from member states.
It doesn't only... So this is in constant negotiation all the time between the states as to what they want to share and what they want to have sovereign.
That sounds like you're describing an intergovernmental organisation. So, for example, the UN. Countries can choose to take rules or not. You can choose to join that or that or that. In the EU, it's known as a supranational organisation, which means that these individual states, the member states, can't choose. They have to take the rules.
And that's changing because the EU is growing, because Ukraine's going to join, hopefully Georgia, Iceland's going to join, and the EU is thinking we can't always have unanimous. What's the word for it? When unanimous.
But of course you can't have unanimity.
So you're starting to do more coalitions of the willing about topics, and that's actually an overhaul. What you just said, that absolutely needs to come and is being brought in.
Hang on,
defence as well.
That is totally not coming in any of the areas of the Commission's competence. Now, you might be talking about the sort of concentric circles of Europe idea, and that would absolutely be true, but that wouldn't be in the EU. I mean, the EU, as it stands, you used to have unanimity in the Commission until they brought in qualified majority voting, where a majority, not even a majority of countries, but a majority of populations...
The Commission or the Parliament?
The Commission is the executive of the organisation, so the Commission determines the rules. Well, of course, in the way that...
So think about it like this,
Think about it like the United States. The Commission is the President, the Parliament is the House of Representatives, and the Council is the Senate. I mean, that is the basic structure of the European Union.
It's more like a membership organisation where you've got the board, and all of the member states are on the board, and then your Commission is your CEO and their senior staff team. So the board sets the direction for the whole thing, but gives the CEO and their senior staff
Well, we're seeing
powers.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer there next to Ursula von der Leyen. Let's listen in to the press conference.
Hello. Good morning, dear Prime Minister, dear Keir, dear Ursula, dear ministers, dear High Representative, dear Maros. Let me begin by thanking Prime Minister Keir Starmer for hosting us here in London for what has been a timely and truly productive summit. A few months ago, Prime Minister, you spoke of your ambition to reset the relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union. Today, I'm proud to say we together have delivered on that ambition. You succeeded, we all succeeded. The agreements we have reached today mark not just progress, but a new chapter in the relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, the start of a renewed and strengthened strategic partnership. Over the past months, we have worked tirelessly to rebuild trust. As we discussed during my visit to Downing Street in December, in an increasingly volatile world, deeper collaboration between like-minded partners, natural allies like us, is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Then back in February, I invited you to join the European Union 27 leaders at a retreat in Brussels to discuss defence matters. There I felt a new positive energy in our relationship. I saw the great potential of what we can accomplish together to make real, tangible progress for the people of the European Union and the United Kingdom. Since then, we have worked hand in hand to support Ukraine, to increase pressure on Russia, to stabilize and strengthen the transatlantic partnership, and to uphold international law and defending the United Nations Charter amid growing security threats. We have been proud of the fruits of that collective effort. A joint statement on cooperation on global issues, a security on defense partnership, and a common understanding and a renewed agenda for cooperation. These agreements represent more than just words on paper. They are a reflection of our shared commitments to security, to prosperity, to development, and to the people we serve on both sides of the channel. Our relationship is grounded in shared values, mutual interests, and the simple fact of our geographical closeness. We are neighbors, allies, partners, and we are friends. Times are changing. The rules-based international order is under attack. Multilateralism is being tested, and the European Union and the United Kingdom are providers of global stability. We must be guardians of the rules-based global order. Europe faces gravest security threat in decades, provoked by Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. But both the United Kingdom and the European Union are united in one belief. We share a fundamental responsibility for the security of Europe. That is why we are committed to continue our efforts together to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine. A peace that guarantees Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. The ball is now in Russia's court. Together, we will intensify pressure on President Putin, including through a new package of sanctions, to bring him to the negotiation table. Russia must agree to an unconditional ceasefire. It must stop being a threat to Ukraine and to European security. On defense, our new partnership will bring deeper cooperation. It will strengthen Europe's contribution to NATO, and it will sharpen our focus on common strategic priorities. On trade, we are united in our commitment to economic stability. We both believe in free trade, fair, sustainable and open, as the engine of prosperity for our citizens and for the global economy. On migration, we will work together to reduce irregular flows and to strengthen cooperation with countries of origin and transit. And finally, today, we also address the situation in the Middle East. In particular, we address the tragic humanitarian crisis in Gaza, a tragedy where international law is being systematically violated and an entire population is subjected to disproportionate military force. There must be safe, swift, and unimpeded access to humanitarian aid. The remaining hostage must be unconditionally released, and the permanent ceasefire must be reached now. Our discussion reaffirmed our shared conviction that lasting peace and security in the Middle East can only be achieved through the implementation of the two-state solution. Prime Minister Lineker, your leadership has been instrumental in turning ambition into action. Today's agreements are a testament to your determination and to the new tone you have brought to our relationship. The United Kingdom and the European Union are stronger when we stand together for prosperity, for security, and for peace in Europe and beyond. This is the message that underpins our renewed cooperation. This is the direction we are taking together after this successful summit, which will be just the first of many, because, as we have agreed today, from now on, the European Union and the United Kingdom will meet every year. So, see you last week in Brussels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you for the words. But my dear here, this is a historic moment because it is the first ever EU-UK summit, and it is a success. And this is also thanks to your leadership. And I really want to thank you for the leadership, because it's not only about the summit, a day where we are here now in London, but it's all these weeks and months of preparation and hard work to get to the excellent result that we have. We're turning a page. We're opening a new chapter. in our unique relationship. This is the story of historical and natural partners standing side by side on the global stage, facing most of the same challenges, pursuing the same objectives, like-minded, sharing the same values, and thus we are looking for solutions that are beneficial for both our people and standing shoulder by shoulder when it comes to really getting to the solutions. I want to have a look at the common understanding, which is basically the roadmap that we have agreed on to follow now after this summit. First, we have concluded our security and defense partnership. This will boost our cooperation in security and defense initiatives. There are lots of topics covered. For example, on the defense industry, but also military mobility, peace building, crisis management, or the countering of hybrid threats, just to name a few. And this is the first step towards UK participation in Europe's defense investment program. We call it SAFE. It's 150 billion euros of loans for joint procurement, and this security and defense partnership opens the door towards the joint procurement. We need another second step, but this joint procurement we've discussed will increase our readiness, will close military gaps that we have, and will increase, that's of most importance, our interoperability when our armed forces are going on missions together. It will create new opportunities, of course, for our defense industries, and, as I said, open the option for stronger, more coordinated support also for Ukraine. That's important either through joint procurement of military capabilities that then are brought to Ukraine, or for direct investment in Ukraine's defense industry. This is against the backdrop that we stand united behind Ukraine's fight for survival, and that we're strongly committed to a full and unconditional ceasefire leading to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. My second point is that I want to speak about what lies at the heart of our partnership, and that's the people. Millions of families and friendships are on both sides of the channel. I am thinking back of my times as a student here in London, and from that experience I know the first place abroad you go when you're a young person, it's an impression for life. You fall in love with the city and the country, and for the rest of your life you are the best ambassador for this country. Therefore, I'm so glad that we have agreed that we will have Erasmus Plus for young people, and that we will work towards a youth experience scheme, just about this experience. This will allow the next generation to once again live and study in each other's countries, and this will build friendships that will last a lifetime. Turning to what connects us further, that is the topic energy and joint climate goals. Today, we have decided to explore the UK participation in the EU's electricity market. It's good for the stability of energy flows. It is good for our common energy security, because we know that a bigger market will also be good for lowering the energy prices, and it will attract more private investment because of the regulatory stability and predictability that is there, to tap into the vast potential that the North Sea offers, specifically for renewable, cheap, and homegrown energy. In addition, we're both committed to leading by example on the path to net zero, and that's why we've also agreed to work towards linking our emission trading system. A larger integrated system is a big step forward in decarbonization and creates a level playing field. Today, we also decided to facilitate trade flows of agri-food products between us, and to work towards a common sanitary and phytosanitary area. That means more certainty, more stability for farmers and food producers and fishermen and fisherwomen on both sides of the channel.
safer food with greater trust from the consumers. And together with the Windsor framework, this will also bring additional benefits for Northern Ireland. It will further ease the movement of agri-food goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland will continue to enjoy dual access to both the EU single market and the UK internal market. And in addition, it's a lot, but we have agreed on. In addition, we have reached an agreement on fisheries, ensuring reciprocal access to waters until 2038. This is so important for long-term stability and predictability. And we have agreed to preserve the historic tariff-free trade in steel products. Steel is a vital sector for both our industries, so this decision is great news. Finally, I'm coming to an end. On justice and migration, we're stepping up our cooperation to keep our citizens safe. That means more joint operational work, especially through Europol, and seamless exchange of information. Because as we all know, crime doesn't stop at borders, neither should our response. On illegal migration, we are joining forces to crack down on smugglers and traffickers. This is organized crime. Our goal is clear. We want to protect our borders and prevent further tragedies. We are also stepping up, therefore, our joint cooperation with third countries. As you know, we on the European Union side have made this one of our priorities, and we welcome that the UK is joining us in this effort. Dear Keir, what we have agreed today is historic. It will make a real difference to people in the UK and across our union. But the message we are sending to the world today is equally, if not more important. It is a message that at a time of global instability and when our continent faces the greatest threat it has for generations, we in Europe stick together. A strong EU-UK relationship is of fundamental importance for that, for our security, for our prosperity, for our shared destiny on this continent. And this is what it's all about today. So I want to thank you for hosting us. It was a great summit, and thank you very much for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Ursula. Thank you, Antonio, for your words, and thank you for your leadership on this as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Britain is back on the world stage, working with our partners, doing deals that will grow our economy and putting more money in the pockets of working people. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've delivered trade deals with India and the US. And that means jobs saved, jobs created, more growth, and a huge vote of confidence in this country. It shows that as global instability is rising, the decisions that we've taken to stabilise the economy and lead the way internationally have made Britain a place where people want to do business once again. And from that position of strength, today we have struck this landmark deal with the EU, a new partnership between an independent Britain and our allies in Europe. This is the first UK-EU summit. It marks a new era in our relationship. And this deal is a win-win. It delivers what the British public voted for last year. It gives us unprecedented access to the EU market, the best of any country outside of the EU or EFTA, all while sticking to the red lines in our manifesto about not rejoining the single market, the customs union, and no return to freedom of movement. So this deal is good for both sides. And let me set out why it is good for Britain. We've struck an SPS deal to make food and agricultural trade with the EU cheaper and easier, and that is slashing red tape and bureaucracy. And that means lower food prices at checkouts, more choice in our supermarkets, and of course more money in people's pockets. It will boost British exporters because once again after a long absence, we'll be able to sell Great British burgers, shellfish and other products into the EU. We've also struck a new defence and security partnership to strengthen our cooperation and strengthen our security, which is vital in this dangerous new era. And it will open the door to working with the EU's new defence fund, providing new opportunities for our defence industry, supporting British jobs and livelihoods. We're also increasing our cooperation on emissions trading, saving UK businesses from having to pay £800 million in EU carbon taxes, once again supporting British businesses, backing British jobs. Next, we're increasing our cooperation on energy to drive down bills in the long term. The agreement negotiated by the last government left us with more expensive ways of working with our neighbours, despite being physically connected to the European grid by our underseas cables. Today's deal will see us work to bring these systems together again, benefiting bill payers and boosting our renewable industry in the North Sea. Today's deal is also good for British steel, protecting our steel exports from new EU tariffs, saving the industry £25 million every year. Another example of this government backing our steel sector to the hilt. We've reached a deal today on fish, protecting our access rights and fishing areas, with no increase in the amount that EU vessels can catch in British waters. Our fishing industry will also benefit from the new SPS agreement, which slashes costs and red tape for our exports into the European market. And we already sell 70% of our seafood into that market. So that is really significant. It is also opening the gates to selling shellfish back into the EU. And I can also announce today that we're investing £360 million into our fishing industry to help them take advantage of this deal. We've acted today to strengthen our borders. The previous deal left a huge gap in our ability to work together to tackle illegal migration. So this deal closes that gap so we can work across migration routes to end the migration crisis and smash the criminal gangs. We're boosting our cooperation on law enforcement, combating terrorism and serious organised crime, with better sharing of intelligence and data, including facial imaging, for the first time. Today's deal will also help British holidaymakers, as we're confirming that they will be able to use e-gates when they travel to Europe, ending those huge queues at passport control. And I call on all EU members to help make this a reality without delay. Finally, we've agreed today to cooperate on a youth experience scheme to allow our young people to travel and work freely in Europe. And I'm clear this will come with all the appropriate time limits, caps and visa requirements. So it's a long list. It shows just how much we've achieved here today. Real benefits for the British people. Because it's time to look forward. It's time to move on from the stale old debates and political fights to focus on delivering common sense, practical solutions which get the best for the British people. We're ready to work with all our partners, wherever it means we can improve people's lives here at home. And that's what this deal is all about. Facing out to the world once again, in the great tradition of this nation, building the relationships we choose with the partners we choose, and closing deals in the national interest. Thank you. We'll now take some questions from the media, and I think I've got the list. I think we're going to go to the UK media first, and then to the European media. I've got Chris Mason, BBC first, please. Chris.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. To be clear, Prime Minister, isn't the truth that you've sold out the fishermen for what you see as the greater good? And a question to the European Union, to President von der Leyen. This deal involves the UK becoming an EU rule taker, which some people here really don't like. Are you pleased to have the UK back within the EU's orbit? Thank you.
Chris, let me go first. Firstly, the focus, the driving principles of the comprehensive set of arrangements we've agreed today is about bills, it's about jobs, and it's about borders. They're the driving principles. And the SPS zone cuts away a huge amount of red tape for businesses in the way that we trade. It is incredibly important for fish because over 70% of our seafood goes into the European market. So for the first time under this arrangement, our fishing communities are able to sell more easily into the European market. As I say, 70% goes into that market. The length of time for the agreement provides the stability, because what would have happened next year is we would have come off the current arrangements, but then into year-on-year negotiations where nobody knows year-on-year where they stand. This gives stability in relation to that. It also opens the door for shellfish and the like to be sold back into the European market, which wasn't available before this deal. And of course, we've announced the £360 transformation fund. So what this goes with is that access on a permanent basis, the SPS agreement on a permanent basis for our fishermen and fisherwomen in our fishing communities into that market. Huge amount of their stock goes into this. So this is good for fishing.
Yes, on your question on rules. Because the United Kingdom is a sovereign country, it can take agreements like this one, develop agreements like this one. And of course, whenever we have an agreement among us, we define together what the rules are, how we will act together on a specific topic. So it shows the sovereignty of a country by being able to take agreements like this one here today.
Thank you. Let me go to Robert Peston, ITV. Robert.
Hello, Prime Minister. Robert Peston, ITV. Prime Minister, isn't this almost the worst of possible worlds, in the sense that you've laid yourself open to accusations of betrayal from Brexit supporters because we are again having rules set for food by Brussels, while you're adding back just a 20th of the GDP, the national income, that we lost when we left the European Union. And Madam President, if I may, today's framework, do you see it as an end, or do you see this as the beginning over coming years of greater integration again between the UK and the EU?
Well, Robert, let me be absolutely clear. This is the result of serious, pragmatic negotiations that are good for our country. And they're absolutely focused on delivery. In the same spirit, with the same mindset that we struck the deal with India and with the US. So this is very good for our country. It is hugely ambitious and comprehensive. The SPS zone, really important in terms of our market access, getting rid of the red tape and the bureaucracy that otherwise would have been there, hugely important as well to Northern Ireland. Then the security and defence partnership, in an era where we're forever saying quite rightly that it's an increasingly insecure world, to be able to strike that partnership so we can cooperate better together, invest in procurement better together and open that door to the European funding is hugely important. The emissions trading is going to be for businesses extremely welcome, because otherwise they would be paying £800 million year on year in carbon taxes. On energy, we're making permanent the current chapter and looking to access to the EU electricity market. On British steel, quotas, specific country quotas for British steel, hugely important in the current environment. On fish, that access to the market. Shellfish being opened up, again, the transformation fund. E-gates, which for many people will be the first discernible difference in terms of travel, ending those queues. On law enforcement, where there wasn't really enough in the current deal, operational work together on institutions like Europol, sharing data, particularly facial mapping, irregular migration. We're pushing forward way beyond the TCA in terms of what we're going to do together, and the youth experience. So the breadth and comprehensiveness of this agreement shows that if you focus seriously and pragmatically on deliverables, you can make a real difference for our country. And just like India, just like the US, Other governments have talked and talked and talked with great rhetoric about what they're going to achieve and achieved little or nothing. We rolled up our sleeves, we've been serious and pragmatic, and we're delivering a very, very good deal for our country today.
Yes, on your question on the framework, I would say the common understanding, that is the document that shows that we're engaging in greater cooperation. And the Prime Minister has just described the topics. I mean, we are sharing the same interests. We're very close friends and allies, and if you look at the topic where we agree on a greater cooperation, for example, energy, we share the interest to lower the energy prices, and we share the interest to have to be more independent in producing energy and to have more energy security and renewable energy. So that's one of the topics where we engage into. The emission trading system, fighting climate change, is the same interest we have on both sides. Security and defense, you just described it. It's a big topic where we can together really achieve big steps forward. Migration, health, hybrid threats. If you look at the roadmap that we have agreed on to develop, I mean, there's a lot of work still ahead of us. That's amazing to see. It's just a better cooperation and a closer cooperation that we are framing here.
Antonio.
Well, just to add that we came looking forward, not looking back. This is not about the past, it's about the future. We don't talk about our previous relationship, but we are working on a new strategic relationship. This is not a U-turn, it's a new chapter, a new strategic partnership, a new security and defense partnership based on the shared values and the shared challenges that we want to address together as we express in our joint statement.
Thank you. And can I come to Beth Rigby, Sky News?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Beth Rigby, Sky News. You state your reputation on getting this deal, and to nail it down, you have given the European Union 12-year access to UK fishing waters, and you have agreed, having ruled it out last year, in principle to a youth mobility scheme. There are those today criticising you for backsliding on Brexit. Don't they have a point? And if I may, I need to ask you about what's happening in Gaza. The UN's aid chief has warned action from the UN Security Council is needed to, quote, prevent genocide in the Gaza Strip. Do you think it is genocide? And can you, in good conscience, stand there as a leader and say you have done all you can? And to the Commission President, it has been a difficult few years between the UK and the EU. You describe this deal as turning the page on those years. Many Britons will welcome this deal, but what is your message to those who voted Brexit in the UK and view these new arrangements with suspicion? Thank you.
Beth, this is a comprehensive agreement. It is balanced, reciprocal, and has huge benefits for the United Kingdom. Based on our three principles, which is driving down bills, driving up jobs, and absolutely having control of our borders. And it delivers on all of those really important measures. And I think it's really significant, as you'll see, supermarkets are already coming out saying how much they support the deal, because they know what this means in terms of the SPS agreement for the prices in their supermarkets, which of course are the prices impacting on working people across the country. I think Salmon Scotland have come out already saying, one of the huge exports from Scotland, how important it is from there. So I listen to the voices of those that are trading, the businesses across the country who are saying this is a good step forward over the voices of those from either side who've predicted what they would achieve and achieved very little. And most of the people complaining about the deal were people who are saying before they knew one single word of what it said that they were against it. So I look at how does it impact on working people? What are those supermarkets saying? What are those businesses saying? Because they're all welcoming it, and they're welcoming it for a reason. That's because it's a very, very good step in the right direction, a really important development. Let me separately address the question of Gaza, because it is a really serious, unacceptable, intolerable situation. And that's why we are working intensely to coordinate with other leaders how we respond to this, because it is intolerable, it is unacceptable, and we will continue to work in that way. Thank you very much. Beth.
Yes. So we are sovereign neighbours, we're friends, we're allies, and this is a new beginning for old friends. In this spirit we have designed the roadmap that we are working on together, and I think it shows, the content shows that we are working towards a friendly cooperation that is of benefit for both sides of the channel. On Gaza, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is unacceptable. For 2 months now, no humanitarian supplies have entered Gaza. Aid must reach civilians in need immediately, and the blockade on Gaza needs to be lifted now, because humanitarian aid must never be politicized. And we are calling for a resumption of the ceasefire and the immediate release of the hostages, so that a permanent end of the hostilities can be finally achieved. We are convinced that the only solution is the two-state solution. This needs, among others, also a functioning Palestinian Authority. We are strongly supporting and financing the Palestinian Authority, and we as a Commission will propose a multi-annual package now of 1.6 billion euros for the years 25, 26, 27 to support the Palestinian Authority.
Just about Gaza. Gaza. As the Prime Minister said, as Ursula said, is unacceptable. Israel must stop now immediately. The Hamas needs to release immediately all the hostage, and we need all together as international community to help the parts to build the two-state solution, the only one who can ensure a lasting peace in the region.
Thank you very much. And Chris Hope from GBNews, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Christopher Hope, GB News. As you know, Sir Keir Starmer, critics say your deal turns us into rule takers, not rule makers on standards. The Scottish Fishermen Association or Federation say your deal is a horror show, far worse than Boris Johnson's botched Brexit agreement. Are they right? Have you been stitched up like a kipper by the European Union? Ms von der Leyen, the Tories will say today they will reverse everything you've agreed today. What's your message to them? And Mr Costa, what are your plans for your future summits? Do you want to see the UK and re-enter the single market and the customs union in your lifetime?
Chris, let me again repeat the driving principles behind this deal, which are really important, which is the question, does it bring down bills? And I think it's really important to see the reaction of supermarkets, of Salmon Scotland, to begin to answer that question, because they are celebrating this because they know it will reduce prices. And we all know how hard the cost of living crisis is bearing down on working people, and therefore bringing down bills is hugely important. Does it boost jobs in security, in defence, steel, of course, and of course across all those areas affected by the SPS agreement, energy and electricity also within the scope of this. And then, of course, does it take vital measures to help protect our borders? And this goes beyond what we've been able to do before in answering those questions. So they are the principles that we set for this. I think it's important to remember in relation to fishing that next year, under the old arrangement, we didn't cease to have any EU fishing in our waters. We simply went to a year-on-year negotiation, which means there's no stability for anybody. And because of the SPS zone being permanent, that does mean for fishing communities that the fish can be sold into the European market. And when 72% of your fish is into the European market, that makes a material difference in terms of cutting the red tape and the bureaucracy. And of course it unlocks some of the shellfish, etc., which couldn't be sold into the market at all until we made this arrangement. And I think it is important to emphasise again the £360 million transformation fund to fishing communities, which has never been put in place before. And that's why the comprehensive nature of this deal across so many strands is totally focused on that question. Does it bring down bills? Does it drive up jobs? And does it help us take control of our borders? And it answers all of those questions, which I think are fundamental.
Well, that was the Prime Minister speaking in response to that new deal struck between the UK and the EU. Lots to cover there, lots to analyse. And indeed, the Prime Minister repeating again and again and again that the principles of his negotiation were to do with driving prices down and exports up.
But will he be able to do that under this deal? It's all a bit sketchy to me. I mean, the UK agrees a Brexit reset deal with the European Union. And so it's interesting because there were quite a lot of things that he talked about. There was a list of things. The SPS deal was supposed to make things cheaper, boost exports. They also talked about the defence and security partnership so that we can work with an EU defence hub, cooperation on emissions trading, energy cooperation to drive down bills, British steel, protecting exports from EU tariffs, saving the industry, protecting the fishermen and our rights with no increase in the amount of fish being caught, which is one of the things that he pointed out, investing 360 million into our fishing industry, although he didn't clarify over what period of time, which I think would be interesting. Is that over the 12 years that we have that the EU will be entitled to our fish? He talked about smashing the gangs, better sharing of data, holidaymakers using e-gates and queues at passport control, as well as the cooperation on the youth experience scheme that's sort of been renamed from the youth mobility scheme.
This is the clever point, because I think what we're seeing a lot here is a lot of spin on top of what has been agreed. But let's return to what the Prime Minister is saying live at Lancaster House.
Return to the customs union, but to do better together as neighbours, partners, allies and friends.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to European media. I've got Euractiv first, which is Owen Morgan, I think.
Hi, thank you, Prime Minister. Owen Morgan with Euractiv from Brussels. There's obviously plenty to dig into on the package announced today, but a question, if I may, on how this impacts the agreements that the EU and the UK already have. You'll be aware that the European Commission in December took the UK to court over its treatment of EU citizens living in the UK. That case concerns a number of potential breaches of the withdrawal agreement, the divorce deal.
Could you just speak up just a little bit?
I may. So the European Commission took the UK to court in December over its treatment of EU citizens living in the UK, and that concerns a number of potential breaches of the withdrawal agreement. Today's package once again talks about the full, timely and faithful implementation of those agreements. So to the Prime Minister, what assurances have you offered the EU as part of these talks on your implementation of the withdrawal agreement? To President Costa, are you satisfied with those assurances? And to President von der Leyen, does the Commission's legal action and court case still remain on the table? Thank you.
Let me be absolutely clear that this builds on the agreements we already have in place, which we respect and have agreed on the basis that will be fully implemented. And that's been the platform upon which we've been able to take this forward. And we've already, in relation to citizens' rights, etc., made advances even before today. But this is premised on the idea that this is a government that, when agreements are struck, respects those agreements and sticks to those agreements. And on that platform, we've been able to build so much of what we put before you today. Ursula, or Antonio.
Okay.
For those listening on GB News Radio, we are currently in the midst of the UK-EU press conference following the new Brexit trade deal that has been agreed. Covers more than just trade, but also security too. Let's rejoin.
What is previously agreed, all these treaties, but now we have a roadmap to work together and to deliver to our citizens in the European Union and in the United Kingdom what is more important: safety, security and prosperity. And the Prime Minister translated very well what means prosperity. Prosperity means economic growth, jobs, lower inflation. And it's for this what we are working together, because together we are stronger and together we can deliver more to our citizens. Then I'm very satisfied and I'm looking forward for continuing to work together.
Thank you.
So, in former times, we have agreed on a set of rules which are presently defining the framework in which we are, for example, dealing with the topic of free movement. Everyone on both sides has to abide to the rules. We have to implement these rules, and in some cases we are searching for legal clarity. This is a normal process that goes on not only on the topic of free movement, but on every topic where you have to implement rules. That's the state of play.
Thank you very much. I've got Mr. Valero from Bloomberg.
Good afternoon, Jorge Valero with Bloomberg. First, for you, Prime Minister, a couple of details on the agreement reached. What is the number of young people coming from the EU that you will consider acceptable to benefit from the new mobility scheme, and whether the EU students will pay the same fees as the UK students here? Secondly, for the EU side, whether you will wait to conclude the more detailed agreement for the UK firms to benefit from SAFE until you have an agreement reached on youth mobility and Erasmus. And very quickly, finally, President Costa, since you were referring to past agreements and your satisfaction, whether you are satisfied with the fact that there is no reference to Gibraltar, which is an important issue for your Iberian neighbours. Thank you.
Let me just, on the youth experience scheme, obviously this gives an opportunity for young people in the UK to work, travel, volunteer, au pair, you name it, in Europe, and the same the other way. It doesn't deal with university fees, just to deal with the particular question that you raised, so there's no change there. It is that experience, it is time limited. I mean, the numbers to be agreed, so it's not an uncapped scheme, and it'll be a visa scheme. So everything will now be done through mutual agreement as we go forward, but they're the principles behind the experience, which will give great opportunities for UK young people, and also great opportunities for member states young people as well.
So 2 parts in your question. The second part first, because the Prime Minister just spoke about the youth experience and Erasmus+. We've very clearly said that we work towards both. What is, of course, now important to detail, to sort out all the details and to describe and then implement all the details. That is now the process that is starting, but the political will is very clearly stated in the paper. We want to work towards Erasmus+ and the youth experience scheme, which is good news for the young people. Your second question was on SAFE for the UK. Indeed, it's a 2-step approach towards SAFE. The first precondition is a security and defence partnership. That has been concluded today. And it opens the door for the UK to participate in the joint procurement under SAFE. Then there comes the second step that is necessary to negotiate a second agreement, and here we detail out, it's again a process of detailing out, budget contribution, reciprocal market access, and rules on security of supply. And this will give, that's important, in the end, the UK industrial participation. This is the goal that we have together.
Well, on Gibraltar, the Commission and the United Kingdom government are talking, negotiating. Maros Sefcovic and David Lammy is making a very good job. It's an ongoing job, work, and my feeling is we are not very close to conclude this work.
No, we are very close.
No, very?
Not very far.
Ah, no, very far, sorry.
An important correction. We're very close. Great. I've got ANP Lauren. Lauren.
Hello, Lauren Heermans from Dutch news agency ANP. This whole summit was about starting over and jump-starting a long-lasting relationship between the EU and UK. However, on fisheries, another temporary agreement has been made for a number of years that sort of seems arbitrary, 12 years. How is that signaling a robust and lasting relationship? Why not a permanent solution? And is a permanent solution still on the table for the upcoming talks, maybe next year?
In relation to fish, I think it is important that we've got the certainty in there, and won't rehearse again what that means for UK fishing communities, the access to the market, particularly on the SPS, etc. But I think there's something bigger here which is important, because what we've achieved today is about looking forwards, not backwards. It's about not reopening all the old wounds. It's about turning a page, starting a new era, closer cooperation across a whole range of issues, and the mindset, the mood, the framing, the intent and ambition is every bit as important as the detail on the page in the very many aspects of this arrangement today, because we jointly agreed at the beginning of this process that we wanted to look forwards, not backwards. And it's because of that that we've been able to make such significant progress today. And it is from that we build forward going forward. And in an era where not many people challenge the proposition that defence and security is more uncertain than it's been for a long time, and we're entering a new era. In an era when not many people challenge the proposition that trade and the economy is entering a new era because of what's been happening in recent months. The significance of the EU and the UK coming together in this way over such a range of issues is not to be underestimated, and that's why it's genuinely a new chapter for our country, a new chapter for our relationships. And that's why I think it's such an important set of arrangements that we come to today. Thank you.
I think the most important part is that this agreement brings stability and predictability for fishermen and fisherwomen on both sides of the channel. You emphasized how important that is in these days, and indeed, I mean, till 2038, that's 12 years, that is a lot of predictability, stability to really also do the necessary investments, and it's finding good solutions. We've been working on for a long time, but prolonging now the time where we can live with these good solutions.
Great. Just on this predictability and stability point, it's really important in the current environment that we have predictability and stability, because when there are uncertain times and instability, having that bedrock is hugely, hugely important. And that's why it's important to emphasise the permanent nature of the agreements that we've reached on SPS, on defence and security, etc. These are not time limited. These are permanent arrangements, deliberately so that we can be clear about the long-term future of this relationship. And then I've got Table Media, I think it is Stephen Israel. Stephen.
Yes, hello, Stefan Israel for Europe Table. I have a question. I mean, we hear a lot of announcements. I have a question on the timelines. When actually will these different agreements enter into force, or when citizens will feel the effects, for example, of the SPS agreement, of the e-gates, and then maybe for President von der Leyen on the safe regulation, how long do we think will it take to come to this agreement to connect the UK directly to these common projects, and how much the UK will have to contribute? I mean, financially, can you give a figure to us? And for President Costa, you mentioned Ukraine. If I'm not wrong, I think at this moment, or maybe in an hour, President Trump will call President Putin. What is your expectation, and what if he cannot convince Putin to agree to this unconditional ceasefire? Would you go ahead with more sanctions, and what kind of sanctions? Thank you.
Let me address the timelines to start with. Firstly, can I emphasise the speed with which we've got to this summit and the achievements at this summit, because we came into government just over 10 months ago. We started in earnest in the autumn of last year in terms of what we wanted to achieve from this summit, and therefore in 6 months or so we're able to agree across this broad range, comprehensive range of issues, and that is real progress at pace. In the past, I genuinely think it would have taken very much longer to reach any one of these strands in terms of agreement. And our message to our negotiating teams this morning, as we celebrated how far we'd come, was to go at pace to make good on these commitments now, and that's a joint instruction to our teams. So we want to see the benefits of these coming just as quickly as possible for all of our citizens. And so you can expect the same pace and intensity as we go forward on each of these strands going forward. Thank you.
I can continue here. The SAFE instrument has now just been approved by all the institutions, so it's ready to go. And therefore, we have to work hard that we have the second step also negotiated, and then we're going to be indeed ready to deliver. So it's a question of, I hope, only a few weeks, and then we should be done.
Achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine is a main priority for the European security. And for this is essential unconditional and immediately ceasefire from Russia. I wish all the best for this call between President Trump and President Putin. We have been very supportive of all President Trump's efforts to stop this war. With the strong leadership of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, built a coalition of the willing to ensure that a positive outcome of these efforts from President Trump ensure effectively a lasting peace in Ukraine and enough security measures. Then we are waiting with anxiety for the outcome of these talks, and I wish all the best for this talk, because from this talk depends a lot of the future of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Ursula. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
So that is the summit that is happening live. They just wrapped up the press conference. I found it very interesting towards the end there. There was the question, which I thought was an excellent question, which is what are the timelines, and also how much will the UK have to contribute? And I noticed that Keir Starmer swerved the timelines and talked about how long it took them to get together. And then eventually Ursula then said, he said go at pace. And then Ursula then said a few weeks, although it's not sure what she was really referring to. But how much will the UK have to contribute was totally ignored.
Now, no answers there. But it's interesting to hear from Antonio Costa, Ursula von der Leyen and Sir Keir Starmer on this agreement that covers so many different sectors of the economy. Of course, we've been talking a lot about fish today, but also nuzzled in that agreement are food regulations, animal regulations, energy regulations, defence partnerships, the lot. It's a huge piece of work.
Yeah, there's a lot going in there. They talked a little bit about smashing the gangs, sharing of data. There was also the holidaymakers using e-gates. Let's remind ourselves of what a great thing that is. That's as long as you can actually afford to go on holiday after all the taxes that have been placed on the UK, and also the youth experience scheme that they renamed. So, in short, the UK agrees a Brexit reset deal with the European Union.
Britain is back on the world stage, working with our partners, doing deals that will grow our economy and putting more money in the pockets of working people. The decisions that we've taken to stabilise the economy and lead the way internationally have made Britain a place where people want to do business once again.
So Tom Harwood now takes us through the detail.
That's right, it's been a long time coming, but what is actually in this post-Brexit trade deal? Let's open up the insides. Well, of course, defence was the name of the game. That was what was on the headlines of the meeting, why we're seeing this summit at Lancaster House in London in the first place. The Prime Minister wanted access to the €150 billion rearmament fund that the EU has set up in the wake of Donald Trump's election in the US and, of course, in the context of the invasion of Ukraine. That has been secured by the Prime Minister. The UK will be contributing a bit of money to that rearmament fund, but UK defence companies will also be able to win contracts from that fund. It's expected to be a positive gain for the United Kingdom. But what else has been agreed? Well, let's move on to those British fisheries. It's argued that we had to give away a lot on fish to win on defence. Clearly, this is an issue that I think it's pretty unanimous the EU has won on. Yes, 12-year access up until 2038 2028, the EU will be able to have privileged access to UK fishing waters. As a coastal state, of course, the UK has a wealth of fish. The UK was meant to get full control over it next year as part of Boris Johnson's agreement. Well, now that's being extended by a further 12 years. But much else indeed. E-gates is a win for the British government. This is going to be one of the most totemic issues of this deal, not because it's huge economically, but because voters will feel it when they go on holiday. 70% of people go on holiday to Europe when they travel abroad, and so these e-gates, being the norm across the EU, being able to go in the EU queue, not the rest of the world queue, will be a big win for this government. Worth noting, though, certain EU countries already let the UK go in their e-gate queue, notably Portugal, England's oldest ally. What else was in this deal? Well, let's have a look at the next side, the food regulations. It's hard to argue which side thinks they have won on this. The Prime Minister thinks he has won on being able to export British food more easily. Burgers and sausages, the Prime Minister mentioned in that press conference, but there's a price. And that price is that Britain becomes a rule taker on food. We'll have to, in perpetuity, take EU rules and apply them to our farmers. One final thing to note, it hasn't taken a lot of press coverage, but energy. Energy is part of this deal too. This deal commits the UK to exploring joining the EU energy market, and that also means dynamic alignment, another area where the UK would take rules from the EU and where the EU could set taxes in the UK. Much more to explore, but let's now move on to Anna Riley.
Good afternoon. Yes, we're here at Scarborough Harbour. We've been speaking to fishermen all day about the implications of this 12-year deal allowing the EU access to our British waters. I'm joined by Mike Cohen. He is the CEO of the National Federation for Fishermen's Organisations. Mike, what do you make to this deal? What does your organisation make to it?
We're hugely disappointed with the deal that's been done. Brexit brought very little benefit to Britain's fishermen. The one thing we did have was the promise that 5 years from when that deal was done in 2020, we will be able to control who accessed our waters and how on an annual basis. And that stood to bring a lot of benefit to fishing businesses, fishing communities all around the country. And we appear to have given that away for 12 years of access for no benefit that I can see to British fishermen.
And we can just see the harbour now. I mean, in its heyday, at one point, you could walk from boat to boat without getting your feet wet. I mean, how has the industry changed? And is this another nail in the coffin to the industry?
It's very hard to see it as anything other than a real backward step, giving away the best tool we had to make improvements for fishing. Fishing suffered from the deal we did to join the EEC in the 1970s and was never really allowed to recover because of that. That same deal allowed French, Belgian, Dutch and other fleets to become huge and hugely successful. And from how hard their governments fought for them over this deal, you can see how valued they are. It's that access to British waters that let them do that, and we failed to have that same ability for our own boats. And we still now have another 12 years when they will get that benefit and we won't have the ability for our boats to grow, for our fleet to grow.
And this deal isn't without the trying and the hard work of the NFFO. I mean, yourself, you've been speaking to Steve Reid. What sort of a deal did you see as being good for fishermen?
Yeah, we spoke to Steve Reid, to Nick Thomas-Simmons, Daniel Zeichner, anyone in Cabinet who had listened to us really, to say that if we were going to allow a multi-annual deal to be done on access to our waters, that's a hugely valuable thing, and valuable things should be paid for. And we wanted that to be paid for with something that would benefit British fishermen. We could have looked to restrict access for EU boats to our territorial waters, the area within 12 miles of the coast. That would let our small boat fleet grow. It would give those fishing grounds a rest. It would have enabled us to manage our fisheries far better. We could have balanced quota more equitably so that we don't have these crazy situations where Belgium has the right to catch most of the sole in Welsh waters, or France has most of the cod in the Channel. We could have looked at so many other things that would benefit British fishing, and we haven't. And we've lost the ability to do that on an annual basis that we thought we would get.
What's next, and what will this do to coastal communities like Scarborough, like along the Yorkshire coast here, which is heritage as well as the industry, isn't it?
It is. It's a heritage that gives the character to places like Scarborough, like Bridlington, places down the coast here that still have fishing and have a long history of it. This is going to be a huge blow to morale. It's the loss of the easiest way that we can make improvements to things, and that's a reality we're going to have to come to terms with. But we're still an important industry. Thousands of jobs depend on us immediately in the catching sector, thousands more in processing, in retail, in all the industries that support fishing. We're far larger than we've sometimes been caricatured as. That goes on, that carries on, and we have to look at other ways. But you know, be under no illusion. This was the best way to make improvements, the most sensible way, and we've lost that. But there's more to come.
And what is next? Because like you say, it's keeping up that positivity, that morale for fishermen who have had a real blow with this, and also an industry where it's 50 years old, the sort of average age, where you're trying to get younger people to come and work in this industry.
Absolutely. And there is still a good career, a good living to be made for young people entering it. There's a fantastic organisation linked to us down in the southwest. The Young Fishermen's Network in Cornwall there has a lot of young people in it and doing amazing things to help and support people get into the industry and kind of knit that young community together. There's more that can be done. The government has made an announcement about, I think, £360 million over 12 years as a coastal communities fund. We'll be looking very closely to see that that money actually reaches the places that are being let down by this deal. We want to see some benefit to fishermen, to the catching sector, to the communities that those fishing businesses support, rather than seeing it hived off into other projects.
And what is next, and what will your message to government be now?
Message to government is that it's about time we had some good news. We've been told repeatedly that food security is national security and fishing is a key part of food security, and yet all we've seen is giving away our best chance of improvements here. We've seen the promise of more and more restrictions on conservation grounds. We've seen the idea that we're going to lose ground to offshore wind construction. If fishing is so important, if national security is so important and we're part of that, when does the good news happen? What is government going to do to support us, or at least stop taking things away from us?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us here at Scarborough Harbour. That's for you, Mike Cohen, there, CEO of the NFFO. We'll be here throughout the afternoon speaking to more fishermen, more people impacted by this announcement today.
All right, Anna Riley, thank you very much. She's there in Scarborough Harbour. Honestly, the deal does not sound good at all. It's the fishermen, obviously, or fisher people, are not happy. We've got to get
the
these
Prime
things
Minister
right.
said fishermen and fisherwomen. But there's so much more to explore here. We're talking about Europe all day, of course. But if you're sort of getting a taste of Europe from all of this trade discussion, perhaps you'd like to go on holiday. Perhaps you'd like to use the shining EU e-gates. Well, if you would, here's the travel weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, looking further afield, there are heavy showers around with the risk of thunderstorms, but mixed with plenty of warm sunny spells. So across Madeira, the Canary Islands, fine and dry on Tuesday. Likewise for much of Spain and Portugal. But we do have this area of low pressure bringing heavy spells of showers and thunderstorms across parts of Europe. Plenty of sunshine further towards the east and feeling warm here too. Otherwise, sunshine and showers, highs of 26.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers, so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
NHS trusts are being told to prioritise ethnic minority applicants for interview shortlists, and they justify hiring white British candidates. Now, the official guidance says at least one BAME candidate must be shortlisted even if white candidates are better qualified. And one NHS trust admitted using positive discrimination to decide who even gets an interview. Now, managers are also told to use race as a tiebreaker, and guess who wins in that case? And to explain themselves if the hire isn't from a minority background. Now, some won't even move forward unless it's a non-white candidate is in the mix altogether. Now, all this while NHS backlogs are hitting record highs. What a carry-on. Dr. Mukherjee, let's start with you. When you look at the naked truth here, there must be BAME candidates on shortlists. You have to justify hiring white British candidates, and a tiebreaker, a toss of the coin. If there's an ethnic minority and a white person, the job will be given to the ethnic minority. Do you think that's racist?
That is racist. And it goes against the fundamentals of the NHS, which is about patient care and quality of care. And as a patient myself, I mean, I know I'm a doctor myself, but by all means, I pay taxes, and you all do as well. We want to get the best quality people serving us. We don't want to be paying money towards some sort of diversity hire just to tick a box. That doesn't serve the purpose. I don't think I would want to be, and I'm a person of colour myself, I don't think I would want to be a diversity hire. I think it's a bit of an insult, really, to think that of all the things I had to offer, the only thing that I have no control over, my skin colour, is what got me the job.
GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 2. Now, I realise the upset I caused. Those are the words of Gary Lineker, who has released his statement following the BBC's confirmation that the former Match of the Day star is leaving his presenting role and won't be part of the BBC's coverage in the 2026 World Cup.
Hi everyone, some personal news. Last week I shared a post here on Instagram that contained an emoji that has awful connotations. Unfortunately, I did not see the emoji. If I had, I would never ever have shared it. The minute I was made aware, I quickly deleted the post and went on to make an apology. I would like once again to say I'm sorry unreservedly for the hurt and upset caused. It was a genuine mistake and oversight, but I should have been more diligent. I know that. I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether and not do next season's FA Cup or World Cup. The final day of the Premier League season on Sunday will be my last show. It's been a pleasure and a huge privilege working with the BBC for 30 years, especially hosting Match of the Day, a programme that is so close to my heart and an integral part of my life. I'd like to thank all of the quite brilliant, talented and lovely people, both in front and behind the camera, that I've worked alongside for 3 decades. You're an absolute best. The relationship with the BBC has been long and wonderful, but it's the right time for the organisation and myself to go our separate ways. Thank you also to all of you for your incredible support and love over so many years. It means the world to me. I'll see you.
Oh no, Gary, the pleasure is all ours. You see, that's what happens when you spout out about things you have no understanding of. Let's cross over to GB News' national reporter, Adam Cherry. Adam, what more can you tell us?
Well, no, I can tell you that here on Gary Lineker's street, just outside his house now, we've seen him leave his property in the last half an hour or so, jump into his car and zoom off. He didn't respond to any questions. As you can imagine, there's quite a gaggle of reporters here, but he wasn't responding to anyone's questions. Gave everyone a quick smile, wound up the window and drove off. Now, you just heard his words there. He spent nearly 30 years at the BBC, more like 26 years. After Sunday's match of the day, it will be his last appearance. He won't host the World Cup coverage for the BBC as expected next year. After Sunday, that is it. And really, it's the end of an ongoing saga of controversies for Gary Lineker. This is really the straw that broke the camel's back, criticising the previous Conservative government, undermining the impartiality rules within the BBC, and causing a bit of a headache, you might say. Now, you heard his words, but here are the words of the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie. He today said Gary has acknowledged the mistake he made. Accordingly, we have agreed he will step back from further presenting after this season. Gary has been a defining voice in football coverage for the BBC for over 2 decades. Goes on to say we want to thank him for the contribution he has made.
Profound moment, Adam, because as you say, despite standing back from the regular match of the day presenting duties and focusing more on his podcast empire, he was still meant to be part of the BBC for the big set-piece occasions. And now, clearly, he won't be.
That's right. Yeah, of course, the World Cup coverage is the pinnacle of football coverage in the UK. So it is a bit of a surprise, but then again, not really, is it? Given, as I said, the amount of times this has happened before. We've covered this many times on the channel, and he has previously had to step back briefly from the BBC. This time it's permanent.
All right, Adam Cherry, thank you very much. Well, stay with us. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, so do not go anywhere. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, any showers largely easing away, leading to a largely dry night, the return of some low cloud, which means it could be a little bit murky for some by the time we reach Tuesday morning. And it's all thanks to high pressure situated to the north of the country, dragging in a northeasterly flow, so a return of some moisture and cloud in from the North Sea. But for many this evening, it should be largely dry. A few showers across southern parts of Scotland, northern parts of England, but becoming very isolated overnight, and a mix of cloud and clear skies, but low cloud particularly across southern parts of Scotland, northeastern parts of England. So a grey and murky start here, particularly across the east, but many towns and cities, temperatures holding up around the mid to high single figures. Then across Scotland to start into tomorrow. Once again, that pesky low cloud lingering across eastern areas, burning back to the coast through the course of the morning. But it should be a largely dry start. Similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but once again low cloud, potentially some mist and fog across eastern parts of England. And fairly similar across the rest of England and Wales, a largely dry and dry start here. And through the course of the day, things warming up. It's likely to be a warmer day compared to what we've had this afternoon. And any low cloud eventually becoming confined to eastern coasts, and a dry start to the day, though it's likely we'll see some showers bubble up into the afternoon, particularly across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England and Wales. The odd one rather heavy, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, but for many areas less cloud, a dry day and feeling a little bit warmer, highs of around 23 degrees Celsius. Now, some showers may linger for a time, eventually easing away through the course of the night, and then we'll see a fairly similar night, a mix of cloud and clear skies, particularly low cloud around eastern coasts, but more rain on its way from Wednesday, particularly across the south, and more rain and showers for the end of the week. That's it from me. Bye-bye.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What does it feel like to be a Great British Giveaway winner?
That's a big surprise. Surprise.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
Yes, that is fantastic.
You know, you have no idea how much I needed it. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I was gobsmacked. Thank you, GB News.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
You really could be our next big winner. Head over to gbnews.com/win now to find out how and get your entry for the Great British Giveaway. Great prizes, even greater wins.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 19th of May. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Nana Akweer. Now, in the last hour, Sir Keir Starmer has unveiled a Brexit breakthrough. A new UK-EU deal is on the table. But what's in it? And what does it mean for you? We're breaking it down.
Yes, selling out our seas. Well, the Prime Minister is under fire for giving EU fleets access to British waters for more than a decade. We're live on the docks in Kirkeel and in Whitby.
Gary Lineker is out. The BBC has now confirmed the Match of the Day star is to step down. We will bring you the latest.
Yes, it's a barnstorming show today. We're going to have so much analysis of what has been agreed and also an exclusive interview with the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson coming up in just a few minutes' time.
Well, stay with us. Send us your thoughts. Post your comments at gbnews.com/your say. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Nana, thank you. Very good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. These are your latest headlines. Top story today, Britain is back on the world stage. Those are the words of the Prime Minister as he signed off a new landmark post-Brexit reset deal with the European Union. The government claimed the reset will cut red tape for travellers and businesses, boosting the economy by £9 billion by 2040. Hailing it as good for jobs, good for bills and good for our borders, the Prime Minister says it delivers on his mission to back British workers and put more money in people's pockets. The deal will allow French fishing boats access to British waters for 12 years, no return to the single market or freedom of movement, and holidaymakers will be able to use electronic passport gates when travelling in and out of EU member countries. Speaking this afternoon, the PM heralded a new era for UK and EU relations.
Britain is back on the world stage, working with our partners, doing deals that will grow our economy and putting more money in the pockets of working people. The decisions that we've taken to stabilise the economy and lead the way internationally have made Britain a place where people want to do business once again.
However, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch thinks the UK is becoming a rule taker from Brussels once again.
There will be things that we agree with in this deal, of course. We want British businesses to be able to sell more. But there was a way to negotiate this deal without selling out so much else. Like fish, for example. We're paying more money into the EU. I think that's extraordinary. This is a complete sellout. I am completely shocked that Keir Starmer has agreed to all of this, concession after concession. What he wants to do is just be able to stay closer to the EU without working in the national interest. I do not think that this deal, there may be good things in it, but overall this is definitely not in the national interest.
Another top story this afternoon, Gary Lineker will leave his presenting role at the BBC this week following the conclusion of Match of the Day for the 2024-25 season. The BBC have confirmed he will not be a part of their coverage of the 2026 World Cup or next season's FA Cup. The 64-year-old Match of the Day host had planned to step down, but a social media row had reportedly made his position untenable. After the announcement, BBC Director General Tim Davies said Gary has acknowledged his mistakes and that they've agreed he will step back from further presenting after this season. Lineker has posted on social media this afternoon, recognising the error and upset that he has caused.
I would like once again to say I'm sorry unreservedly for the hurt and upset caused. It was a genuine mistake and oversight, but I should have been more diligent. I know that. I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be.
And Abu Wadi has been jailed at Canterbury Crown Court for 9 months after pleading guilty to attempting to illegally enter the country. The Palestinian live-streamed his arrival on a small boat in Kent. With the court hearing, he paid smugglers £1,300. Wadi has reportedly called previously for the slaughter of Jews before he was arrested by immigration enforcement officers. And finally, artificial intelligence, including ChatGPT, is set to be used in schools under new government plans. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, wants Britain at the forefront of what she's calling a revolution in educational technology, but insists that safety is a top priority. A £1.1 million pilot will test how the tech can reduce teacher workload, improve outcomes for students, and increase inclusivity for children with special educational needs. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Right, well, it's just coming up to 6 minutes after 2 o'clock. This is GB News on Good Afternoon Britain.
Absolutely. Now, we've got a lot to get stuck into today. Obviously, the biggest news of the day is that new deal struck between the United Kingdom and the European Union. We're going to be getting lots of reaction to it, of course, throughout the day. But first, we've sat down with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson to get his view on this new Brexit deal. Take a listen.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much for speaking to us on GB News. This deal, is it really a Brexit betrayal or the best deal that could be hatched under the circumstances?
Well, I think it's a complete and deliberate betrayal of Brexit, and it goes against what the Prime Minister said he was going to do at the election in 2024. He said he wouldn't go back on Brexit, on the freedoms that the British people won in that referendum. He's done the absolute reverse. He's decided to make this country a rule taker. So for a huge range of issues on food standards, hygiene and many other things, areas where we want to do things differently, to take advantage of new technologies, we're going to be taking rules from Brussels under the control of the European Court of Justice with no ability for our Parliament, our government, to vary those rules.
But fewer checks on the likes of foodstuff.
Number two, he's done a total sellout on our fisheries. A large part of Brexit was taking back control of our fantastic coastal waters. From January next year, under the deal that we did, we were going to get back control of every single sprat and mackerel in UK waters. He's put that off for at least 12 years, allowed Macron, which is what he wanted, allowed the French and many others to plunder UK waters again. Number 3, he's done a deal for dynamic alignment, keeping up with the EU without voting on it in some environmental matters, the emissions trading scheme, which will mean maybe we're locked into bureaucratic and expensive EU green policies. Number 4, you can see that he's paving the way for a massive sellout on borders so that 80 million Europeans who are between the ages of 18 and 30 can have the right of free movement to come to this country without let or hindrance, making a complete nonsense of what we did, which is taking back legal control of our borders. And worst of all, he's decided that we can pay for this. We're going to pay for the privilege of once again being ruled in many ways by Brussels. We're going to be coughing up to the EU budgets. It's absolutely absurd. It goes against what he said. He's turning this country once again into the orange ball chewing leather trust gimp, if I've got the right word.
Well, going back
of Brussels.
Going back to fishing, there will be those that argue that actually, it was the previous government that sold fishermen down the river in the first place by allowing Europeans access to fishing grounds for as long as they did.
Well, it was 1973 that, if that's what you mean, when Edward Heath, basically under the advice of the Treasury, basically decided to trade away UK
continuing to fish after the Brexit agreement.
And so what we did was we came up with a transitional plan, and this was very hard fought, and step by step we were taking back control of our fisheries. And as I've just explained to you, under the plan this is why the EU was so panic-stricken. That's why they wanted this so-called reset, because they knew that from January next year, every halibut, every cod, every mackerel in our waters was going to revert completely to UK control. And the disaster is that Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister, has thrown away that massive negotiating advantage for absolutely nothing in return. And I think it's completely the wrong thing for UK fisheries.
But critics will argue that it was a poor and a weak deal in the first place, first Brexit deal that has allowed this to happen.
No, that's rubbish. I don't know who these critics are, but they're talking total rubbish. Because actually, the deal that we did, as I have said, I think, and I'm saying that for the third time, allowed us to take back control of our fisheries in their entirety from next year. So what's really happened is that all the Remain establishment who never cared about the UK fishing industry have collaborated with the European Union to prevent that from happening. And they've done a deal with Macron and other EU governments to abandon the gains that we had won, and to throw away our rights to our fish at the very moment when we were about to take back full control.
Would you agree there are some positives, though, if your regulatory checks on the likes of foodstuffs?
But what are you I think what this shows is how completely pointless and vexatious those regulatory checks really were. And by the way, they're still not saying, as part of look carefully at what they say in the agreement. They're still not saying that it will really be possible for a hamburger or a bacon sandwich or whatever, or a sausage roll, to go completely without checks from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. They're still not saying that there will be unfettered, frictionless movement across the Irish Sea. They're not saying. Look at it carefully, and that is a disgrace. What we should have done is stuck with the UK internal market measures that we had, the protocol bill that we brought forward shortly before I was sadly obliged to leave office, which we should have stuck with that, because that made sure that there really couldn't be any barriers to trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And with great respect to everybody who set up the so-called Windsor framework, it didn't fix the problem. And you've got a situation now in which the UK is being tied closer and closer to the European single market, unable to deviate, unable to do things differently, which we've got to do in a competitive global economy, because of the risk of diverging from Northern Ireland. That's totally wrong. The UK should be able to do exactly what it needs to do. And, look at what is really happening in the world economy. Compare the growth rates of the European Union and the United States of America or other developed economies where they have a more liberal, a more free market, a less regulated, less high tax approach. That's where the growth is. Why is Starmer taking us back into the sweaty embrace of Brussels when it's massively uncompetitive, low growth, and low productivity? It's totally the wrong thing for us to do.
What about the defence element of this deal? The potential to share in some of the 150 billion euro defence expenditure?
Well, I find this one of the most ridiculous subjects of all. The UK is the second biggest contributor to NATO after the United States of America, or has been for a very long time. We, the UK, continue to help our European friends and partners with defence commitments in Estonia or wherever, to say nothing of the leadership that we have shown in helping to protect the Ukrainians. How utterly incredible that they should now have some special requirements forbidding us to take part in European defence markets. It's utterly absurd and protectionist. And we should have nothing, frankly, I don't believe that we should have had anything to do with it. We don't need to be fettered by some European defence or security community. It will never work. It's no substitute for NATO. And you've only got to ask yourself the question, who leads such a community? Is it going to be France? Is it going to be Germany? Is it going to be the UK? We're never going to agree on any of those. It should obviously be us, but they're never going to agree on it. It's just not going to happen. You need America. You need NATO. We should stick with that structure. Buy and sell from each other within the NATO framework. It's obvious.
Well, Kemi Badenoch agrees with you. She doesn't want any part of this deal. She's going to fight it.
Good.
But is she judging the public mood correctly, do you think? Do you think there is still an appetite out there amongst the public to continue the Brexit debate and the Brexit rows that we had so much of a few years back?
Do you know what? I love the public with all my heart, but I care about the issue, and I don't want to see our country become the punk of Brussels. I don't want to see our country a non-voting member of the EU. I don't want to see our country returning to unfettered free movement with 80 million people eligible to come from the European Union. I don't want to see us forced to accept rules over which we have no say. I think it's anti-democratic. And I don't think this agreement should be signed. And I think the next Conservative government, and this, God pray there's a Conservative government as soon as possible, should get rid of this thing lock, stock and barrel.
You don't think the public will be seduced by the lack of passport queues then?
Look, I'm giving you, again, a classic example of why these barriers and these burdens were wholly vexatious and unnecessary. Get rid of them anyway. They're not doing anybody any good. So, it's a very, very bad deal. He's chucked away a huge amount, not least the entirety of UK fisheries, for absolutely nothing, as far as I can see, in return. Scrap the deal.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much again for speaking exclusively to GB News.
Boris Johnson speaking to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, his response to the summit. Right, well, let's speak to Peter Edwards. He's the former editor of the Labour List. Peter Edwards, this must be music to your ears, this whole deal. Are you pleased with what Keir Starmer has negotiated?
Well, we need time to go through the detail, but I want to say, having heard a very long monologue from Boris Johnson, I mean, this must be a sad day for him because it crystallises his irrelevance and his impotence. And your interviewer really confronted him with some of this. You know, Boris Johnson looked a shadow of his former self. In terms of what happens in the deal, we've got a deal on defence, and there'll be different things in the deal that some voters like and some don't. But it's the first duty of the government to keep the nation safe, and we've got a defence deal. So I think that's pretty positive.
I was just going to say, apologies to the language, by the way, that was in that interview, because there are a few words that some people may be offended by.
Classic
but
Boris
Peter Edwards, yesterday, you were on my show saying, oh, the fish, there's nothing going to be involved in this, there's nothing about the fish in this deal, blah, blah, blah. You went on and on about it.
I didn't say
you
that
were
at all.
wrong. You were.
No,
I'll play it back to you. I'll find that clip and I'll play it back to you. But I pointed out that the fish would be part of that negotiation.
I did not say that fish wouldn't be in the deal, because every newspaper that was published at midnight on Sunday said fish would be in the deal, and fish is in the deal, and I think we always knew that. It's actually an extension by 12 years of what the Conservative government signed. Now, I was interested when I checked back. The Conservative government was led by someone called Boris Johnson.
Hang on, Peter Edwards.
The fish deal.
It's important to note exactly what was in the 2020 agreement. And that was a transition period due to end next year in 2026, after which point Britain would have control over all of the fish in our waters, in our exclusive economic zone, that then would be negotiated each year on the basis of that standing, like Norway does over its own waters. And each year you could negotiate the quota that British fishermen and European fishermen would have in our waters. That control that was due to come in next year is now not going to come in for at least 12 more years. You can understand why fishermen feel this is a much worse deal.
Tom, OK, I think there's a question in there somewhere. But, you know, if you're saying that the Brexit utopia that was promised to us has not been borne out in reality, then I think we can all agree with that sentiment.
I'm saying there was a transition period.
Yeah, and exactly. You know, because the argument about Brexit has been settled in the sense of we're staying out of the EU, we're not having another referendum, and I don't particularly want another referendum. But it's clearer with every passing year that the deal negotiated by Boris Johnson and then rewritten by Rishi Sunak was a bit of a mess. And I think what you've quoted just evidences that.
Hang on. No, sorry, Peter, I'm not going to let that stand. That doesn't make any sense at all. Fishermen were expecting to get control over our waters next year. It's written there in black and white in Boris Johnson's deal. 2026 was the year that the transition ends and sovereignty returns to UK waters. And yet, just at the moment that our fishermen are about to claim that prize, just as the light is there at the end of the tunnel after a tricky few years, which no one is denying, just as that moment is there within their grasp, this government comes and takes it away from them.
Well, I wouldn't put it like that at all. So firstly, Boris's deal was a bit of a mess, and that was why another Conservative Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, rewrote it. Secondly, actually, I was just looking at what fishing bodies have been saying today. Most of our salmon comes from Scotland. The Scottish Salmon Association said it was a good deal and are pretty happy.
Well, that's not what we've been hearing from the actual fishermen that we've been speaking to specifically today, having heard the deal. We have Anna Riley, who's there talking to fishermen, and they are not saying that so far. Now, I just wanted to... I don't know whether you were listening in on the full conversation, but Ursula von der Leyen, she mentioned that there will be a second defence agreement on funding, rules and defence. Did you hear that bit? Because isn't that a bit of a risk, really, if this isn't the full deal, but there'll be another deal?
I didn't hear it all. As I understand it, we've got a foot now in the £120 billion defence loan agreement, which goes across the EU. I think that's probably a good thing. But no, I think perhaps where we might have some sympathy is that it feels like it's never ending with the EU. And I think what you just said indicates that there always seems to be another negotiation around the corner. The Prime Minister's been trying to clear that away. Fish, for example, not having annual negotiations. It's sealed for 12 years. But I think at the Ursula von der Leyen point, about defence, it is a bit of a concern, because I think that's the nature of the EU. When there's just one of us and 26 or 27 of them, we are going to be back at the table on one topic or another every few years. I think that just underlines the weakness of Britain's political position after Brexit.
Well, only if you want to be going closer to Europe.
Well, you only get weaker if you go in and give up all your sovereignty and all your power, which is unfortunately what I see this deal. Let's speak to former Conservative...
Oh, hang on. Sorry. Peter Edwards, we're just going to jump to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is at the press conference in Lancaster House.
Thank you, Peter, by the way.
You can join us. Yes, thank you very much, Peter Edwards of Labour List. Chopper, you asked the Prime Minister a question just a few minutes ago. Yes. Did you feel like you got an answer?
There, that's right, Tom and Nana. Yeah, I'm still here in central London. We're having a briefing with the PM's spokesman about what was agreed. We have various elements emerging already. They want this new e-gate access to be available as soon as possible, maybe this summer. They've been very clear that the money we're paying to be part of this new standards agreement on food and agriculture, none of that will be paid into the European Union budget. We're told that will just be the admin cost. I asked, well, how much will it be? Tens of millions of euros or more? They won't say. That's up for a new renegotiation maybe next year. Also, no idea on the cap, on this youth experience idea of having young people going from the UK to EU and back again. No figure for the cap. That sounds like it's been agreed at the Brussels summit, the return summit next year. And also, this idea of £9 billion annually by 2040, they make clear that's twice the India deal. So they're trying to be very clear. They want to be judged on these three things: lower prices, jobs, and secure borders. And also, they made clear that, that with the fish agreement running out next year, at the same time as energy, there was concern about being able to manage our energy needs with that deal ending at the same time as fish. So there's certainty, according to the government, across those two areas. But I asked Sir Keir Starmer earlier, really the question that's dominating GB News viewers and listeners today, and it's about fish.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Christopher Hope, GB News. As you know, Sir Keir Starmer, critics say your deal turns us into rule takers, not rule makers on standards. The Scottish Fishermen Association or Federation say your deal is a horror show, far worse than Boris Johnson's botched Brexit agreement. Are they right? Have you been stitched up like a kipper by the European Union?
Chris, let me again repeat the driving principles behind this deal, which are really important, which is the question, does it bring down bills? And I think it's really important to see the reaction of supermarkets, of Salmon Scotland, to begin to answer that question, because they are celebrating this because they know it will reduce prices. And we all know how hard the cost of living crisis is bearing down on working people, and therefore bringing down bills is hugely important. Does it boost jobs in security, in defence, steel, of course, and of course across all those areas affected by the SPS agreement, energy and electricity also within the scope of this. And then, of course, does it take vital measures to help protect our borders? And this goes beyond what we've been able to do before in answering those questions. So they are the principles that we set for this. I think it's important to remember in relation to fishing that next year, under the old arrangement, we didn't cease to have any EU fishing in our waters. We simply went to a year-on-year negotiation, which means there's no stability for anybody. And because of the SPS zone being permanent, that does mean for fishing communities that the fish can be sold into the European market. And when 72% of your fish is into the European market, that makes a material difference in terms of cutting the red tape and the bureaucracy. And of course it unlocks some of the shellfish, etc., which couldn't be sold into the market at all until we made this arrangement. And I think it is important to emphasise again the £360 million transformation fund to fishing communities, which has never been put in place before. And that's why the comprehensive nature of this deal across so many strands is totally focused on that question. Does it bring down bills? Does it drive up jobs? And does it help us take control of our borders? And it answers all of those questions, which I think are fundamentally important for working people. Thank you.
So Keir Starmer there, basically saying we are not being stitched up like a kipper, as I had asked him, or our fishermen were certainly. And I also asked Antonio Costa, he is the European Council President, whether this is the long-term journey for us, is back into the single market and customs union, and his answer was fascinating. He thinks a page has been turned, and that includes not requiring us or wanting us to go back into that idea of the single market and customs union. The sovereignty of Brexit, according to these three people today, Ursula von der Leyen, Keir Starmer and Antonio Costa, that is safe.
OK, well, Christopher Hope, thanks for being there with us and getting that official briefing with all the details too.
And also that brilliant line, stitched up like a kipper, which everyone's taken up. Right now, they're joining us, former Conservative MP Steve Baker and also Dr Mike Galsworthy, still with us, the chair of the European Movement UK. Well, we'll start with you, Steve. Welcome. I want to ask you, so what is your take on what has been negotiated?
Well, Keir Starmer's done what he always wanted to do. He's sat down on the EU's side of the negotiating table and given them what they wanted. And it's a rather pathetic refusal to accept the new direction which this country chose at the referendum and subsequently with Boris's enormous general election victory.
What's the worst thing, do you think, out of what he's done?
It's tricky to say what's the worst without asking for whom. So it's terrible for fishing. I mean, there was an argument for a long transition, given how weak we were after so many people had tried to overthrow Brexit after the vote. It's terrible on emissions trading. We've basically capitulated that we will be adopting EU emissions trading. That will drive up electricity bills from an already high base. And it's terrible to adopt rule following on what he called an SPS zone. Let's be really clear here. New Zealand and the EU have a deal based on mutual recognition on veterinary standards. If we'd done that, we would retain control of our own system.
So just to explain what mutual recognition is, this means that the EU accepts that New Zealand's food standards are safe. They can be different rules, but they accept they can be safe and therefore accept each other's goods. And the EU doesn't do that with us.
No, they've insisted we take their rules, and it's really important because it puts us in breach of our free trade agreement obligations, like India, United States
America,
in due course, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. They all require us to have control of our own regulatory system. So we're highly likely to be sued under the dispute mechanisms of those different treaties. It's very bad news.
But Keir Starmer's obviously a lawyer. He should have been able to see that.
Well, I don't doubt he will have taken legal advice, although ministers never comment on that. But it's really pathetic. He's done what he wanted to do when there were other ways forward, which the EU has precedent for, and we really didn't need to become a rule taker on fish and food products. Let's be really clear what the problem is. It's not that what our rules are and what their rules are going to be. EU and UK food is always going to be safe to eat. The problem is filthy meat that doesn't comply with anybody's rules crossing borders, and we've already got that problem, and it needs to be dealt with on both sides. Let's not pretend there isn't filthy EU meat, or rather filthy meat coming from the EU that's compliant with no one's standards.
No, it's a point. We did all end up eating horse accidentally just a few years ago. But Mike Galsworthy,
as well.
Let's talk about some of these points, because obviously there's give and take on both sides. The government wants to promote the idea that it'll be easier to trade with Europe, and the opposition parties are saying, well, the price of that is taking Europe's rules.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we are taking their rules in order to drop all of those barriers. And on a rolling basis, which just means that all of the barriers that we had before, trading both ways, are going to fall away. Now, some people get really anxious about, well, why are we taking their rules instead of it being our rules? But we've had about a decade since this whole Brexit debate kicked off, and people have not been identifying places where we should diverge. And it's been a constant question, those that advocated Brexit, OK, so where are we going to diverge that we spot advantage that these 27 other countries don't spot
Well,
advantage?
OK, where are we going to diverge? Let's talk about the trade deal with India and the trade deal with America. If we have to follow EU rules, then Steve's point that it may mean that we have kind of foregone our right to trade with these people and the trans-partnership as well. I mean, is that not a problem?
And not for me, because...
Well, not for you, but I'm saying for us as a country trading with these people.
Do you want American food standards or European food standards?
Well, America...
That's not the point, though, is it? Because
it's not
the American deal...
But at the end of the day, this is a kind of forced choice scenario.
But also...
It is because America wants to force their foods and standards and
that's not
acceptance
true.
of those on us.
That's not true. Donald Trump said that when we talked about chlorinated chicken and everything else like that, he said, well, actually, we are looking to clean up the food system and go your way. But the point that I'm making is that by doing this deal, have we not foregone our right to be involved in these other trade deals that we have negotiated?
I don't think so, because you go and you talk to those other trade deals and say, look, this is the system that we've got. You do a trade deal with us, just like you do a trade deal with the EU.
But we've already done the deal.
India and the EU are in negotiations all the time. The US...
The legal jeopardy here, though, of course, is that we don't know what the EU is going to legislate for in the future. We know that, for example, in EU elections, we've seen the rise of the far right in a lot of these different countries. What if, in the future, the EU Commission stops being nice and liberal and starts being much more beastly?
You associate right-wing with being beastly?
I associate
far right,
particular
all
form
extremes,
of extremism on the left and of the right, a sort of reduction of individual liberty on either end of the extreme as a total beastly ideology, absolutely. And I'm seeing that rising in continental Europe, and I'm seeing parties unlike any party in the United Kingdom, because there are lots of parties that have been besmirched in incredibly ahistorical ways. Unlike the parties in this country, there are parties in Europe that are born of literal fascism. There are parties in Europe that are born off the back of the movements that we saw in the 1930s in Europe. If they take power in European countries and we have to take their rules, that is a world I don't want to live in.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs there. I mean, there are 27 countries in the EU. How many of them do you think are going to fall in the next few years?
I have literally no idea.
Fascists who are insistent on eating rat meat or something like that.
Well, that's the point. You don't know the answer. But you don't know the answer, do you, though? So that means you are blindly following something that can take you wherever it wants to take you, and you have no control to stop it.
No, because you can always cancel your contract.
How do we get out of the contract, then? Do you know how we get out? If we decide we don't like the way you're going, we want to get out, will it be as hard as it was to try and get out of the EU?
Well, listen, you can always have your food standards above someone else's food standards. And I mean, I think this example of Europe is going to be taken over by fascists, when actually in Romania, a centrist just won. And then in Poland, you know, the centre came back in. And if you look at the European parliamentary elections, the centre-right has held. I think these are pretty wild scenarios, and I don't see what they've got to do with food.
If I may,
should we bring Steve Baker back in?
Just the public choice issue here is that everybody's self-interested, and when you're accepting somebody else's rules, there'll be rules made to somebody else's best interests. I mean, this is the issue why we shouldn't take somebody else's rules. It's wrong in principle, it's wrong in practice, it's going to create massive problems for us with our other trade deals. And I just really wonder what people are trying to achieve when they insist we ought to be a rule taker. What's the public policy objective here is to make sure food is safe to eat. The EU, in establishing a mutual recognition and equivalence deal with New Zealand, has shown that they can do things that way. It's because we've chosen, Keir Starmer has chosen to be a rule taker, even though for perfectly ordinary reasons that people regulate in their own interests, or rather sometimes to suit special interests. It is for those reasons it's not a good idea to take rules over which you've got no control. It's a stupid thing to do.
Something you mentioned earlier was the emissions trading scheme that's part of this. Now, the EU sets a price on carbon, in effect, in lots of different ways in different industries. Not a flat carbon price, but a sort of pick-and-choose one. And it looks like the UK has signed up to take the EU carbon price. You say that will raise energy prices, but the Prime Minister is saying that joining the EU energy market will reduce energy prices. Well, were you right and was he wrong?
Well, I think I'm right because I'm relying on analysts who I've watched tweeting about it this morning who are making that claim, and I know they're meticulous in their attention to detail, but I shall certainly follow it up and I'll put more out on social media. But look, we are at a stage, as I think Mike said earlier and others, we do need to see all the detail of this. But from what we can see, if we opt into the European Union trading system, we will end up with higher prices because they've set higher prices on carbon. Again, it's not a good idea in an environment where the public know and energy-intensive businesses know that their electricity bills are far, far too high. It's not a good idea to surrender our emissions trading scheme to somebody else's discretion. It's just a terrible idea. I'm afraid Northern Ireland will be paid in aid again, and that's not good for the whole UK. And I'm going to be watching with great interest what Northern Ireland unionists do, because if they support aligning to the EU in the interests of Northern Ireland, in a sense holding back GB, it will be very interesting to see what happens with Nigel Farage and Northern Ireland unionism. We could end up with a new wedge there, and that's not good either.
Wow, so much to think about. I wish we had more time, because there is so much more to discuss in this deal, and no doubt we'll have both of you gentlemen back at some point very soon. But Steve Baker and Dr Mike Galsworthy, thanks indeed for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain.
Right, well, of course, good afternoon. If you just tuned in, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Stay tuned, as lots more to discuss. We'll be discussing more on that new EU deal, and we'll be speaking to a fisherman in Northern Ireland.
And if you're sick of Europe, well, Meghan Markle has revealed new pictures of her and her husband Harry on their 7th wedding anniversary. We'll have all the details for you.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through today, we'll see a mix of cloud and also some sunny spells. This cloud thick enough to produce some showers at times, the odd one turning heavy with a risk of some isolated thunderstorms. But for many, it should be a settled start to the week. That's all thanks to high pressure situated to the north of the country, but at times it's dragging in a northeasterly flow, so a return of the low cloud at times for eastern areas. And for the first part of the afternoon, there will be a fair amount of cloud around, but breaking up nicely, allowing some sunny spells to develop, but still the risk of showers across southern parts of Scotland, northwestern parts of England, and perhaps at times across Northern Ireland could see some showers, but for many feeling warm still in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees Celsius. Then to finish off the day across Scotland, largely dry, the return of the low cloud moving into eastern areas. This will move further inland as the evening progresses. Still 1 or 2 showers affecting southwestern parts of Scotland and also Northern Ireland. Northern parts of England too could catch 1 or 2 showers still to finish off the day, but across the rest of England and Wales, largely dry, once again with a mix of cloud and clearer spells. As we head through the overnight period, most showers easing away, though the odd 1 or 2 lingering at times across Northern Ireland, southern parts of Scotland, and fairly similar towards what we see during the day, a mix of cloud, clear spells, but once again a return of that low cloud drifting in from the North Sea. But temperatures are remaining in the mid to high single figures for many towns and cities. So it should be a dry start to the day. Once again, still some low cloud lingering across eastern coasts, burning back mostly, but it could tend to linger for much of the afternoon around some eastern coastal counties. And once again, a largely dry and bright day for many, but still a risk of showers, particularly across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Once again, the odd 1 or 2 turning heavy, possibly thundery, but feeling warm in the sunshine, highs of 23 degrees.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A720 eastbound after Gilmerton faces prolonged journey times due to a broken down vehicle. Motorists should exercise caution. Electrical work on the M4 between junctions 4-3 Landersea and 4-2 Earlswood causes closures on entry and exit slip roads with lane restrictions. Diversions are in effect. The M62 eastbound between junctions 32A and 33 in Wakefield has a lane closure due to a collision. Further east, an accident on the M4 between junction 10 and 8 in Bracknell Forest prompts a complete lane closure. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express services face disruptions through Lockerbie. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 20 to 3, and the Prime Minister is being accused of capitulating to the EU.
Sir Keir Starmer's government have signed off on a new trade deal with the EU, allowing French trawlers to have access to British waters for 12 years.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what does this deal mean for the fishermen you've been speaking to?
Well, I've just lost my two guests. They've actually got into their vessels, and one's headed to Scotland, the other one to the Isle of Man. But they were so fed up, Tom, it was unbelievable. I never seen men so down in the mouth. They said this is the end of them. They pointed at this 360 million that's meant to be for coastal communities. They've said that will be for decommissioning vessels and putting in wind farms. They may not be far wrong. They looked at cheaper fish, but less caught. They're saying with the national insurance they're having to pay the rises in the minimum wage on these boats. They cannot afford to go any tighter. So really what they're saying is those EU vessels that will be fishing our markets will be selling to our supermarkets cheaper than they can. Again, not a good day for them. But to explain this, I mean, not a better person could you get to explain this deal, because I've been dealing with the Northern Ireland Protocol or the framework document, whatever you want to call it, for years. And Northern Ireland hasn't seen one new job come because of EU regulations. Von der Leyen talked about more work with the Northern Ireland framework. Well, of course, they still have the EU regulations 2017-625, which still says Northern Ireland is a third country from Britain. We still have to take everything on board that is coming in EU regulations. And the SPS checks that Keir heralded there have cost millions of pounds in Northern Ireland, because the paperwork for companies that are actually trying to export is massive. It's all about the statistics. It's about proving the point of origin, where the goods came from, that goes into that. That will be very, very hard for producers. And in amongst that, of course, is food standards. Food standards means that our farmers will have to take EU regulations to make sure that their food can get into the EU. The British Steel, the shipyard here in Northern Ireland, closed down because it was paying 25% in British Steel. And it's all really about regulation and legislation and taxation with no political representation. I spoke to Thomas McKee earlier on, Trevor McKee earlier on. He's the head of the fisheries here in Northern Ireland.
Where we're standing here now, not 4 mile away from European waters, between the 6 and 12 mile limit, where boats in Northern Ireland who historically fished there all their lives are not allowed to go since Brexit. Now, we've been looking for a reciprocal deal from the Republic of Ireland to get access to those waters, and it hasn't been given. Keir Starmer's caved in again, as all previous UK governments have done to Europe.
So, Doogie, the general energy there is that people are very disappointed with this deal. OK, well, Doogie, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Doogie Beattie, Northern Ireland reporter.
Well, joining us now from Yorkshire is our news reporter, Anna Riley. Anna.
Good afternoon to you both. You join us here at Scarborough Harbour. Beautiful day, but certainly the harbour wasn't what it once was. There's been a commercial fishing industry here since the 13th century, and at one point you could actually hop from boat to boat here without your feet touching the water. It was so huge. There was fish markets here. It was certainly a thriving industry. But speaking to fishermen today in reaction to that EU-UK deal in terms of fisheries, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of upset, and there's a lot of anger. One fisherman I spoke to likened the deal to a farmer growing carrots and people from other countries just being able to come and pick those carrots with the farmer not having any say. Now, this was the views of Pip Fairline earlier that I spoke to, and Paul Fishburn, two fishermen here from the area. This is what they had to say.
Got sold out with Brexit again, which was supposed to be taking back control. Brexit was a big thing. They used fishermen as a litmus test type thing. It was go the fishermen, go the fishermen, and as soon as it happened, they sold us out. And then with this again, it's just more of the same thing. It's to be expected now, because fishermen are just something that, you know, fishermen are just, they're not even thought of by the government.
They've let the British fishermen down in a big way. So what do? Do we keep plodding on? That's the reason there's no young lads coming into the job. We'd love to see young lads coming into the job, but they just don't want it because the government has let everybody down.
Those two fishermen there here in Scarborough just reflecting that anger and upset that fishermen feel about this deal. The worry for the future of the industry as well, trying to get young people into an industry that they feel is now on its knees. So that's the feeling that we're getting here in Scarborough, speaking to fishermen today about that deal.
All right, Anna Riley, thank you very much. She's out there in Yorkshire. Yeah, very, very disappointing. Earlier we spoke to Peter Edwards and he was saying that there's a bit fishermen people that are happy. I haven't heard one yet.
I haven't seen a single one.
Not one.
But if you're feeling miffed, perhaps you're in need of a holiday, and perhaps, well, after all the chat about Europe, you'd like to visit. Here's the travel weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, looking further afield, there are heavy showers around with the risk of thunderstorms, but mixed with plenty of warm sunny spells. So across Madeira, the Canary Islands, fine and dry on Tuesday. Likewise for much of Spain and Portugal. But we do have this area of low pressure bringing heavy spells of showers and thunderstorms across parts of Europe. Plenty of sunshine further towards the east and feeling warm here too. Otherwise, sunshine and showers, highs of 26.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's been 7 years today since the Duke and Duchess of Sussex tied the knot. Yes, Meghan has just shared a post on Instagram thanking all those who have loved and supported them throughout their love story.
Well, our very own royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us now to go through all the gory details.
The 7 years. The 7 years of hell.
No, I can see, Nana, you're loving this, aren't you? Yes. So, a massive collage of new photographs, unseen photographs we've got of Prince Harry and a very, very young baby Archie back in 2019, we believe in the Portland hospital, actually. Have a look on gbnews.com for zoomed-in images of this. We've got some holiday snaps. We've got a Christmas image of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. Lots of photographs of the children, I might add, bearing in mind they do like privacy of their young family. And, of course, lots of snaps of Harry and Meghan as well. You're right, 7 years to the day since they got married. I think all of us thought a breath of fresh air, Meghan marrying into the royal family back in the day. But then, of course, behind the scenes, it started to go wrong. Then they very dramatically exited in 2020. Then, of course, they complained about pretty much everything. We got the book, we got the Netflix series, we got... What else did we get? We got Prince Harry recently as well.
We had the bench.
With the BBC security interview, we did have another
bench.
Yes.
Yes, the bench. That's where it stayed.
Meghan wrote a children's book called The Bench, which didn't, let's say, didn't rate particularly well, did it, Nana? No. But you know, throughout those 7 years, they have done some pretty interesting initiatives. The Parents Network, for example, supporting parents who've lost their children through online harms. That's a pretty big initiative they're championing at the moment. Of course, Harry and his Invictus Games as well. I suppose the question is, what next for Harry and Meghan? There's been a lot of trial and error, I think, over the last couple of years since they stopped complaining. And the simple answer is we don't actually know. But we do know they're not speaking to the royal family.
Well, perhaps some privacy would be good, which is what they were supposedly in search of. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Do you remember that? Oprah, they wanted privacy.
Yes, of course, they did want privacy. Meghan said, accused the royal family of questioning what colour Archie's skin would be when he was born. Then William was forced to say, we're very much not a racist family. Then Harry backtracked during the promotional interviews for Spare, saying we never accused them of racism. We said it was unconscious bias. And then the question a lot of people came back with to Harry was, well, if all of this talk about racism within the media following the Oprah interview, why didn't you go on the record and correct it?
Especially after what you've supposedly been through, after you have been treated apparently so badly by the media. Why would you want your family to be treated badly as well, especially if it's something that is a miscommunication?
And I think this is perhaps why, unfortunately for Harry and Meghan, their popularity in the UK, according to YouGov ratings, the latest ones, are not great. But, you know, there may be light at the end of the tunnel. They may get better.
That's just one of many reasons, I suspect. Cameron Walker, thank you very much. There's plenty more coming on today's show.
Well, there isn't. It's Martin Daubney. There's plenty more coming on Martin Daubney's show. Should we listen in?
No.
There we go. Martin, what's up?
Hello, Martin.
Your show was so good you didn't want it to end. I know you're feeling fantastic innings today. Well done, great stuff. On my show today, Sir Keir Starmer's dressing up this Brexit reset as a win-win and historic moment. Is that the truth? Or is it a huge capitulation, a surrender, a sellout of fishing? How long will we be locked into this? How much will it cost? I've got some numbers. Eye-watering bills might need to be paid to Brussels. Plus, also, is it time for a dad's army to protect our power stations from Putin, you know, those who volunteer? And also, are women the weaker sex? What's wrong with a bit of an argument on today's show? New data shows that women are twice as likely to throw a sickie. I think that's because they can't act the pace. Well, I said it, I'm in big trouble. Tune in. But mostly, it's all about the Brexit. My favourite topic. Tune in 3 till 6, but first, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head through this evening and overnight, any showers largely easing away, leading to a largely dry night, the return of some low cloud, which means it could be a little bit murky for some by the time we reach Tuesday morning. And it's all thanks to high pressure situated to the north of the country, dragging in a northeasterly flow, so a return of some moisture and cloud in from the North Sea. But for many this evening, it should be largely dry. A few showers across southern parts of Scotland, northern parts of England, but becoming very isolated overnight, and a mix of cloud and clear skies, but low cloud particularly across southern parts of Scotland, northeastern parts of England. So a grey and murky start here, particularly across the east, but many towns and cities, temperatures holding up around the mid to high single figures. Then across Scotland to start into tomorrow. Once again, that pesky low cloud lingering across eastern areas, burning back to the coast through the course of the morning. But it should be a largely dry start. Similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, but once again low cloud, potentially some mist and fog across eastern parts of England. And fairly similar across the rest of England and Wales, a largely dry and bright start here. And through the course of the day, things warming up. It's likely to be a warmer day compared to what we've had this afternoon. And any low cloud eventually becoming confined to eastern coasts, and a dry start to the day, though it's likely we'll see some showers bubble up into the afternoon, particularly across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England and Wales. The odd one rather heavy, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, but for many areas less cloud, a dry day and feeling a little bit warmer, highs of around 23 degrees Celsius. Now, some showers may linger for a time, eventually easing away through the course of the night, and then we'll see a fairly similar night, a mix of cloud and clear skies, particularly low cloud around eastern coasts, but more rain on its way from Wednesday, particularly across the south, and more rain and showers for the end of the week. That's it from me. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Someone is going to win the biggest prize package to date, and that someone could be you, driving away in this Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It has plenty of room for your family of 4, comes complete with kitchen, bathroom and all the space you'll need for life on the road. Plus, we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, what happened was the Queen didn't strip Harry and Meghan of their HRH titles because that would have been unnecessarily unkind. But she asked them, please do not use these. You keep them, but don't use them. And what she meant by that was don't use them in any public way whatsoever. So do not, have your luggage labels, HRH, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and don't have your writing paper. They have their coat of arms. They are the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but not with the HRH. I think that Meghan is very lucky to still have hers.
Yeah, well, in a lot of ways she is, absolutely. But it doesn't seem to be any self-awareness, does there, with this podcast? It's all about woe betide me. It was all so difficult. We were in the trenches after we got married. And if we all cast our minds back to that spectacular day where they had everything in front of them, the world was watching, the world was celebrating, everyone was on team Meghan and Harry. But it's only now that she's in California living her best life that she's able to have her honeymoon, apparently. What do you make of it, Ingrid?
I can't believe she could say such crazy things. I mean, if she wants to maintain some semblance of popularity, she's got to be a little bit more humble. And what she could have easily said, the wedding was absolutely stupendous and it was wonderful and the British people were so welcoming, but sadly it didn't work out. I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to say that, even if she didn't mean it. I just think that she is sometimes remarkably stupid.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good afternoon to you.